2023 was a pretty good year for video games, and I would know. I talked about one of them, being Pizza Tower. I mean, obviously Pizza Tower, wasn't the only game that came out that year. There were some other really solid ones as well, like Resident Evil 4 Remake, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. That game was like really cool. Super Mario RPG actually came back. Like, who saw that coming? However, when it comes to 2023, there was one game that people often talked about that I actually never tried, and honestly, after playing it for myself this year, I really feel bad that I missed out on it, and that game was Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. Funnily enough, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is a game that I literally cannot get enough of. Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is the spiritual successor to the Jet Set Radio series, a series of 2 games that I am not super familiar with. In a way, this is kind of similar to the Pizza Tower video, because Pizza Tower was a game that was a spiritual successor to another series being Wario Land, but I'm familiar with those games. But with Bomb Rush and Jet Set, not so much. So for this video, before we get into the nitty and gritty of how good this stupid game is, I wanted to at least play through both Jet Set Radio and its sequel, Jet Set Radio Future, to get a good idea of what to expect when it comes to Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. But before we get into all of this, hey, time to do some plugs. If you just so happen to like my content and this video, feel free to subscribe. Subscribing is the easiest way to support the channel, and it puts a good smile on my face. Secondly, feel free to join my community Discord, Nitrosity's Dustbin. It's a very humble, small server. We just recently surpassed 100 members, so thanks everybody who decided to join. We're now officially going for 200 members on the Discord. We play games every now and then, so if you possibly want to hop on and maybe make some new friends, play some games, this is definitely a nice, quiet little server just for you. If you are interested, feel free to join it in the link in the description. Finally, we have my Twitter account. Don't really use it all that often if I'm being honest, but feel free to drop a follow. We're almost at 200 followers. It'd be nice to finally get that 200 on my account. And that's all I have to say. Please enjoy the rest of the video. So Jet Set Radio, developed by Smilebit, which initially released for the Sega Dreamcast, was a console that was so good that it was discontinued. Now before we get into anything relating to the gameplay, I just wanted to spend some time to talk about the characters, because yes, you do have to pick a character before you play the game. Now what's interesting about this is that each character has stats. There's 3 in the game: power, technique, and graffiti. I'm just going to quickly go over what these do, and then we'll actually get into some real gameplay. Power just simply relates to how much health the character has. Technique, apparently, from what I've gathered online, the stat in this game, it's not super obvious, because apparently it relates to the speed of characters, which I have played a couple technique characters. I've played almost all of them except the ones you get in the post game, and to be honest, I barely can tell the difference between the technique characters, so I'm not sure. And then graffiti characters, from my experience, I think are the best characters in the game, because it just relates to how many points a character can receive from doing graffiti tags. Now, Jet Set Radio's gameplay is honestly pretty deviously simple. Basically, after you pick a character, you get dumped into a pretty small open level here. At least in Chapter 1, it's just confined to that single area. You basically go around, collect spray cans, then you go find one of these big red arrows, and then you just start painting some graffiti. Then you get put into a QTE segment where you have to move the analog stick in the direction that the game tells you in order to complete it, and every time you do one successfully, you get some points. Alternatively, get points by, doing tricks and rail grinding. You can actually also do some other stuff, like wall riding, and you can even do some stuff on half pipes, though half pipes only seem to appear in like one level in the entire game, so you rarely see them. So it's mainly just rail grinding, jump tricks, and of course, wall riding. And when you start doing this, you'll start start a trick combo. Essentially, it's just seeing how long you can keep a combo going until you touch the floor, basically. And that also means I want to quickly talk about this one achievement in the game, being this one. Basically, you just need to get 100+ combo, which you would think it's pretty hard, which it's not. All you have to do is just boot up the tutorial and basically just do this, like, for like 4 laps, basically, and the achievement is essentially free. It's like the freest achievement. How do like 3.1% of people actually not have this achievement? It really isn't that hard, you guys. Anyways, back to the game. Honestly, you don't really need to worry about doing that many tricks anyway, because graffiti just gives you way more points anyway, so you're better off just doing the graffiti with a graffiti character and then occasionally doing a couple tricks when you get the opportunity to. And you'd probably think, well, that seems pretty easy, doesn't it? Yeah, it does sound pretty easy, but obviously nothing in life is easy, because you also have to deal with the police that end up showing up. At least at the beginning, it's not so bad. Most of the police are led by this guy, Mr. Oshima, who is really hellbent on teabagging you like it's Halo 3. Basically, it starts off pretty tame with the most basic police officers just football tackling you. Your biggest threat, obviously, being Mr. Oshima himself, where all he does is he tailgates behind you, points a pistol to the back of your head. Apparently, you can also spray his back, but unfortunately, I've actually not been able to do that. I'd assume you'd have to be much better at the game, which, as you can clearly tell, I kinda suck shit, so, yeah, I ain't doing that anytime soon. And if I'm being honest, like, the police in this game are super unhinged, because later on in this game, where apparently we actually found out who let the dogs out, and it was Mr. Oshima, and, like, he just sends the whole goddamn pack on your ass. I mean, it gets so bad that he literally has to call in the military for what I can only describe as a bunch of high schoolers. And so once you deal with the police and you spray everything, you get a rank based on your current score, which funnily enough is exactly what Sonic Adventure 2 did, even though that game came out after this did. I think Sonic fans owe Jet Set Radio a lot more credit than it's given. Oh, and I completely forgot to talk about the story. Yes, there's an actual story of this game, and most of it is just kind of told to you through this guy. This guy is called DJ Professor K, and he is the DJ of the pirate radio station. Get this, it's called Jet Set Radio. Roll credits. Oh, and just in case you couldn't tell who he was, he also put his initial on his forehead. Either that, or he's just a really big fan of Dr. Neo Cortex. He kinda just serves as the exposition dump, but I mean, at least the writing's at least good enough. And I guess it also serves as some world building, because this is the radio station that plays all of the music of the game. So yeah, chapter 1 is pretty simply, the GGs are trying to become the next big graffiti crew. They're going all over Tokyo, which is the city that you're currently residing in, and you have 3 major obstacles. You have Poison Jam, Love Shockers, and Noise Tanks. They're the 3 big rival crews that you have to deal with. 3 stages are just the normal Jet Set Radio gameplay I just talked about, and then you have a 4th stage, which is honestly pretty lame. It's basically graffiti tag. Basically, you just follow the rival team and you spray their backs a bunch of times. They have a temper tantrum and then the level's over. Yeah, I'm not too big of a fan of this part of the game. But you do all that and boom, you get access to Chapter 2. Now that we're talking about Chapter 2, I should probably mention that at this point, everything I've talked about with Jet Set Radio is done. Yeah, there's pretty much nothing else to this game aside from what I just talked about. So at this point, we're just gonna fly through the rest of this. So Chapter 2 is actually the shortest chapter in the game, as it only has 2 levels and 2 new unlockable playable characters. And yeah, you can unlock playable characters throughout the game. It's pretty easy because it's either just Simon Says or it's just a race, that's it. So you get 2 characters, Combo and Cube, you do their thing, and then it's also revealed the new big bad villains of this chapter being the Golden Rhinos, led by Goji Rikaku, which surprisingly enough, the main big bad villain of this entire game is quite literally just a corporate CEO looking to suck the fun out of these kids' lives. So yeah, he needs to go down, and he needs to go down pronto. So pretty much these next 2 levels, yeah, they're obviously based on US locations. I think it's Manhattan and Times Square if I'm not mistaken. And honestly, in my opinion, these 2 stages, yeah, they're my least favorite in the game. The first one I did, honestly, wasn't too bad. I still prefer the Tokyo Toe ones though, and I just realized I sound like that Place Japan meme. Anyway, then you also have the Times Square level, which I think is easily the worst level in this game. Obviously, this level is the verticality based level, and just so happens that there's literally only one way to gain height, and it's with these conveniently placed slow moving elevators that completely kill the pace of this level. This level sucks, I hate it. And after you complete those 2 levels, that's it for chapter 2. Yep, it's over and done with like that quickly. And then we can finally move on to chapter 3. So now we're finally on to the 3rd chapter of Jet Set Radio. At this point, the game basically opens up entirely, and now all 3 of the chapter 1 levels have now become these big open-ended levels as opposed to just full miniature ones. And obviously at this point, the coppers are not the big bad enemies. Instead, it's Mr. Akaku and the Golden Rhinos, aka a whole bunch of assassins just trying to kill a bunch of high schoolers for just painting on walls. And honestly, I don't really have a lot to say about this section of the game, other than I just think it's just really fun, and that's it. It's just the same stuff you've been dealing with for basically the whole game at that point. You also do get to do another game of graffiti tag, this time with a bunch of mind-controlled Poison Jam members, but like I said, I don't really care about this part of the game, so it's just kind of there. Then obviously, once all is said and done, you also get access to the final boss of the game, Mr. Okaku, and cinematically it's, well, on his big building, and honestly I kind of hesitate to call it a boss fight because it just feels like a series of basic platforming challenges, rail grinds, and then the occasional graffiti QTE while avoiding a giant golden fire-breathing rhino. Once you paint all the graffiti, which for some reason is its weakness, the golden rhino explodes, basically leaving Mr. Akaku open, and you basically defeat this guy by spraying the back of his head, and then apparently he falls off his building and is, by the way, he is presumed dead, and then his son takes over for the company. His son has no beef with you, so you're basically free to roam the streets. And once you beat the game, there's a bit of hefty amount of side content that you can dive into here. We have 3 game modes for each level in the game, even the ones in Grind City, you know, the US stages. We have Jet Graffiti, which is, honestly, it's just the same Jet Set Radio stuff you've already been dealing with. You just go around, paint graffiti, and do some tricks. The only difference being is that the police aren't involved, and neither are the assassins. The next one is Jet Crush, which is just all the racing stages that you've already been doing when you unlock some of the playable characters throughout the campaign, only they're just replaced with random characters now if you already have those characters unlocked. And then moving on to probably the most unique game mode in the side content here, and that is Jet Technique. Basically, it's the same story as Jet Graffiti, but instead of it being about graffiti, it's about doing tricks on rails and doing jumps and cool stuff like that, which actually comes back to the Technique characters, and now they're actually worth playing because they actually give you slight bonus points when on rails, because I literally just found that out when recording this part of the video. So hey, at least I figured it out in the end. And with basically all that, aside from extra playable characters, that's all that Jet Set Radio has to offer as a game. It's a relatively short one, all things considered, but honestly, this game's pretty good. Like, I enjoy it. Game control's a little clunky, but honestly, if you look past that, which is pretty easy for most early 2000s games, this is a pretty damn solid game, and if you haven't tried it out, mate, go for it. It's only like $8 on Steam. Definitely worth it. But with that all out the way, it's finally time to understand
the concept of love. Understand the concept of love.
So this is Jet Set Radio Future, the sequel to Jet Set Radio. Now, when it comes to the overall discussion of this game, I don't think a lot of people really often talk about it all too much, at least compared to the Dreamcast one, mainly because I feel like a lot more people ended up playing it. This is mainly because of, 1, relatively poor sales, and 2, the fact that it only released on the original Xbox. And this game was only ever available on this console, and surprisingly enough, this game hasn't actually been added to the whole backwards compatibility lineup on like the Series X or something. It was, however, backwards compatible on the 360, but they recently just shut that down. Luckily though, I do have access to emulation, so that's how we're going to be playing this game. So we start out with the glorified tutorial section in the GG's Garage, where we play as Yo-Yo and we want to join the GG's. It still follows the same precedent as the original game. We talk to this guy whose name is Korn, very odd name for a a character, I'll be honest. But then again, this chick's called Gum, so I don't think I have any right to judge. You go through the glorified tutorial, and then you can just kind of start playing the game. One of the new additions to this game is the hub area, the GG's Garage. It's a nice place to practice your new moves and all the stuff that you're probably going to be getting used to if, per se, you know, if you're starting out with this game or something. I didn't really use it too much. I already played the original Jet Set Radio, so, because I got my street smarts. This time around, the gameplay and story kind of go a bit more hand in hand, which is a good explanation as to why the arcade-style stuff from the original game doesn't really show up in the main campaign of the game. Now, don't worry if you do kind of miss that kind of stuff. It is actually still in the game, but it's actually relegated to post-game content, which we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So, obviously, the story itself, mostly the same beats as the original. DJ Professor K obviously filling you in on the details. You still have the rival crews like Poison Jam, Noise Tanks, and of course, the main big bad villain is Mr. Rikaku of the Rikaku Company. The Golden Rhinos still here, the police still here, though this time the police actually have been straight up bought out by the Rikaku Company, and Captain Oshima from the previous game has been replaced with this guy, who I forgot the name of, but his only claim to fame, at least for me, is that he sounds like the Joker, and when I say the Joker, I mean like he's trying to be the Joker, but he fails miserably at it. The gameplay of Future is fundamentally the exact same as the original game. You still go around these big open areas and paint a bunch of graffiti. However, when making the jump to the sequel, they decided to tweak a couple things to make the gameplay a bit more smooth. So we're going to be touching upon most of these as we go through the game here. Probably the first one I wanted to talk about is the rail grinding. Fundamentally, still the same. The only thing they really changed with it, though, is that they added a dedicated trick button, as opposed to just sitting on the rail and doing nothing. You now actually have to put in the effort to do tricks on rails. All you have to do is just simply press the X button and you'll do a trick. You can also do this with the Y button as well, and apparently you actually get more points when you do it with the Y button, so just keep that in mind. And you can also press the trick button mid-air, which is a nice little added bonus. Another thing they also greatly changed was the graffiti QTEs. Originally, you had to just twirl the stick around a bit. In this one, they simply streamlined it to be just a single button press, which you can find them pretty easily by these little icons over here, and just press the right trigger and you'll paint some graffiti. Then, Beat will end up showing up. We'll do some, you know, Simon Says stuff with him, and it's really easy. Then, he'll challenge us to a little race around Dagonzaka Hill. This map is, you know, just one big circle, so it shouldn't be too difficult, which gives me the perfect excuse to talk about this little beauty. This is the Jet Booster, a very situational type of ability which allows the player to essentially go incredibly quickly at Mach speed. It's the fastest movement in the game, but at the cost of 10 spray cans. So like I mentioned, this is a very situational ability, so you probably want to use it in very precarious situations. It's pretty useful for getting up incredibly steep inclines, so you probably want to use that sometimes. It's also pretty useful for making longer jumps as well. With the obvious increased speed, you can use it to get some pretty decent distance. So honestly, I like the addition of this ability. It's really cool. So now let's talk about the coppers, as they do show up after you beat in his little race here. In this game, they've kind of been downgraded to just a simple distraction rather than a genuine obstacle that you need to avoid in these segments. So instead, you kind of just fight them, and when I say fight them, I mean shoulder tackle into them, spray their backs, and for some reason that kills them. I don't know why, but I think the people of this town just seem to have a really bad thing with spray paint. Like, they are allergic to it or something. I don't even know if there's a term for it. You even fight the police chief, whose name I don't know. He's a total pushover. Like, this dude is basically all bark but no bite. He sucks. So I've kind of talked about all the mechanics, so at this point we may as well just kind of skim through the rest of the story here and occasionally stop when there's something new to mention. So let's start with chapter 2. The first stage is Chuo Street, a Poison Jam stage, where it turns out that we get ambushed by the police yet again, and apparently the police decide to waste no time and just send the tanks out straight away. Again, they're high schoolers. Like, why do you need tanks to stop a bunch bunch of high schoolers. I have no idea. This guy's clearly way more unhinged than Onishima ever was. And I still don't remember his name. So yeah, you deal with the coppers again, you deal with the tanks, and then you go back to spraying. Then, after you're done with that, you can go to Rokakudai Heights, which is the next area where they went off to. The Rokaku police, once again, show up in Rokakudai Heights. You already know how to deal with them, I don't need to tell you. But then Poison Jam will end up leaving, and you actually don't know where they went. So now you need to get some information. So you decide to head over to 99th Street and meet the Rapid 99s, a actual brand new crew added specifically for Future. And same thing, you go around, you spray their graffiti, and the police also end up showing up, this time with spotlights, despite the fact I'm playing as Korn, who I feel like doesn't really blend in super well with the background. And so once we deal with that, we obviously need the information from Rapid 99s. So basically the Rapid 99s challenge us to a game of capture the flag like it's Halo. Yeah, basically the way this little mini game works is basically you just go for one of the flags that spawns on the map. It's a best 3 out of 5, so you only need 3 in order to win. So then they'll tell you that they actually headed down to the sewer. Thus this ends chapter 2, and then we can move on to chapter 3. So now moving on to chapter 3, we now know that they have gone to the sewage facility, which obviously brings us down to the sewer. Now before we actually get into the level, we get trapped. So Garam over here decides to help us out, as long as we do what he says for a minute. So we actually get to play around with a new feature added for the half pipes, and that's just a very simple handstand. All you have to do is just press X instead of A before jumping at a half pipe, and you'll do it. You can chain this together as much as you want, but yeah, that's kind of all he really did for half pipes here. So after you do all that, he lets you up and he joins your crew. And then we actually get to the proper underground sewage facility level, and it's kind of fine, I guess. This one is kind of interesting because it actually revolves all around half pipes and doing like platforming challenges around them, which I think is a really cool way of integrating them, especially because I feel like they were kind of an aspect of the original game that weren't really used all that much. So this is definitely nice. And you probably also noticed that this level is all vertical based, which means if you fall off, you have to do the whole thing over again. But hey, it's not all bad. There's this one giant lizard here that just kind of takes laps around this sewer. So you go around, you spray all the door switches, and then the door finally opens to the bottom of the sewage facility where Poison Jam lie, led by the returning cube from the last game. Yeah, she leads Poison Jam now. And well, obviously, now that we've kind of cornered Poison Jam, everyone's favorite game mode, graffiti tag, makes its grand return. Yeah, it's fine. I didn't really care about it too much. The only difference now is that they now have health bars as opposed to just numbers on their backs. Kind of ends up being a little bit more annoying because Poison Jam are pretty tanky, so they take a lot more sprays, which takes up a lot more time, which takes a lot more of my patience. So next up is chapter 4. The stakes get raised a little bit as Yo-Yo have suddenly gone missing. The noise tanks have returned, as well as the new graffiti crew introduced in this game, the Immortals. I really like their designs as well. They're all based on like ancient Egyptian mummies and stuff, and I just think it's such a sick design for these guys. Like, I really like them. And yeah, this entire chapter just revolves around the Immortals. So 3 new places open up: Hikaki Street, Kibo Gaioka Hill, the Skyscraper District, and Pharaoh Park are now all unlocked for you. All of them have immortal graffiti, so yeah, you kind of know what happens at this point. And of course, you deal with the Rokaku police as they show up. However, I will actually go to Hikaki Street because actually this one has a boss fight. So yeah, this boss fight is the Terror Drone, piloted by the captain of the police in this game. However, the main problem with it is that it's actually not ready. It's a little bit unstable at this point. Shouldn't be too difficult. It basically just camps at the top of this little tower here. So you just grind to the top, avoid the bombs it drops. Then you jump onto the thing, spray it a bunch, and then it just explodes pretty much. The police will hoist it out of here, allowing you to just return to, you know, the typical graffiti stuff. So once you've completed all of the graffiti challenges, you go back to Skyscraper District, where you end up meeting with the Immortals, and you engage in some graffiti tag once again. This This one actually isn't too bad because I don't think they really get that far, but then again, once you actually take them down to half health, they'll end up retreating over to Highway 0, where they regain all their health and you have to do it again. But don't worry though, Highway 0 is actually a relatively flat stage, so this one is actually a lot more easier to deal with. And so once you finally deal with them, they'll actually reveal to you where Yo-Yo has been captive. Bam! You're suddenly backstabbed and turns out that Yo-Yo was a part of the noise tanks all along. Ends the chapter in a bit of a cliffhanger. And then we get into chapter 5, which is actually the shortest chapter the entire game, by the way. As this chapter is the obligatory, hey, we have a multiplayer game mode, please play it section of the campaign, where basically you are captured by the noise tanks and are forced to play their game of Death Ball with a new character, Jazz. She was just kind of forced in here because noise tanks thought she actually was a part of our crew, but she just wants to get out of here, so she's willing to work with us just to leave. So yeah, this is Death Ball. After doing some practice with Jazz, we now get access to 3 Death Ball matches. The first with Doom Riders, the second with the Immortals, and the returning Love Shockers from the previous game. And this game mode is really easy because all you have to do is just book it to the ball, pick it up, and do a lap with it, and you win. Like, I did this 3 times in a row, and it was easy, and it's boring. I don't really care about this mode, just get it off my screen. But luckily, after we deal with the Love Shockers, we actually don't win because the police will actually interrupt our match, invading the entirety of the Rikaku Expo Stadium. And then we also have a rematch with the Terradrome from the previous chapter, only this time it's, well, on the ground as opposed to a giant tower we have to climb. Same story as last time, you grind on its legs, you spray it a bit. However, there is an extra spot to spray it, and it's with the little underbelly here. You have to kind of get under it while it's doing one of its attacks, so it's a bit of a risky maneuver, but it really isn't that bad. And once you deal with this little Terradrome guy, that's it. The police are done for in this game. You never see them again throughout the entirety of the rest of the game. And with that, we managed to escape and move on to chapter 6. So the noise tanks have gotten a little bit pissy because, well, we managed to escape and they didn't do anything. So they sent a bunch of their clones to just dance mid-air. So we need to destroy 200 of these guys. You can get the 200 really easily just by going to Dogenzaka, Shibuya, and Chuo. Like, this isn't really too difficult. After that, you then want to go to Skyscraper District, which is where a lone member of Poison Jam here will just kind of let you in that Yo-Yo is actually making his way over to Sky Dinosaurian Square. This level is just a big dinosaur-themed roller coaster. The whole level is just you grinding on rails, so it's quite literally the Jet Set Radio equivalent to Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes. You'd end up doing a graffiti tag with the noise tanks, and it plays just as you expect it to. Except this one noise tank here got stuck and wasn't able to do anything, so I just saved him for last and unfortunately put him out of his misery. Where it's here that is revealed that the noise tanks were actually cyborgs built by the Rikaku company, and the Golden Rhinos have come here to quite literally kill off the noise tanks. And it also turns out that the identity of Yo-Yo is actually a noise tank. They kidnapped Yo-Yo and built a fake one to try and destroy the GGs, which they failed, so the Golden Rhinos just kind of came in and wiped them out. But now that we know that the Yo-Yo that supposedly betrayed us isn't the real one must still be out there somewhere. So chapter 7 wastes absolutely no time. So now that we know that Yo-Yo's been kidnapped, we now need to go find him. But first, we have this guy, Clutch, who comes in and, well, wants to see our graffiti souls, and when we show them to him, he dips. He nicks them. So now we have to go chase after him. Once you talk to him, he'll just kinda give you your graffiti souls back and then join your team. Yeah, thanks for wasting my time, you daft cunt. Which allows me to also talk about the graffiti souls in this game. They were in the original game, but they were just kind of really used just to get more graffiti, so essentially more cosmetics. And while they do serve the exact same function, they kind of serve a bit more as a optional collectible in this game. Kind of turning this game into a little bit of a collectathon, which is kind of interesting. You can easily find them on the maps as well, as they are indicated by these big red dots on the screen. So yeah, they're hidden throughout all the levels of this game, and you just need to collect a couple of them. Most of them will just kind of be hidden in different areas, so you kind of need to get a little bit creative with how you do your platforming in order to obtain some of these, but they shouldn't be too bad. By the way, you do need 40 of these in order to progress through the game, just at least 40. And honestly, from my playthrough, I honestly managed to get like 30 before I faced off against the noise tanks in chapter 6. So all I had to do was just quickly get like the last 10 and I was ready. There is actually another way to grab these guys, and it's with the street challenges. Hidden throughout the level is a little gold tape. This gold tape will give you access to that level's street challenges. There's 5 in total, and 4 of these challenges are all the same. They all just revolve around the same challenge, just with different values and stuff. And then the last challenge is always a level-based one. So let's take a look at Shibuya Terminal's challenges as an example here. The challenges available, we have get a grind combo of 10, a air combo of 3, doing 25 tricks and getting 100,000 points. And then the 5th challenge is to jump on the platforms of whatever that means, and we have to do it 13 times without falling off. And of course you get 1 graffiti soul for doing each of the challenges. And once you do all 5 of those challenges and collect all the graffiti souls that are naturally spawned in the area, you actually 100% the area. And well, while you can't access it yet, the graffiti souls do unlock something, but we have to complete the campaign first in order to access that content. So let's get back to Clutch, I suppose. So after you deal with Clutch, now it's time to go find Yo-Yo, and he's been captured and brought to the fortified residential zone. So once we get to the fortified residential zone, we now have to deal with the golden rhinos as they have rigged bombs in the area, and we're now stuck on a bit of a time limit here. First we need to tank the blue switches, then tag the red switches, and the golden rhinos will try to stop us, but obviously we prevail. And then we find Yo-Yo and free him, and then the golden rhinos will suddenly send in a bunch of jets, and then we defeat the jets, and that pretty much ends chapter 7. So here it is, chapter 8, the final chapter. We're taking the fight to the golden rhinos now that we've freed our friend Yo-Yo. So the first 2 bosses can be found in Highway 0 and Chuo Street, and it's up to you on which one you want to take on first. I actually went to the one in Highway 0 first, with the average pyro main. This one wasn't too bad, it was kind of easy actually. But then we get to the one in Chuo Street, Mr. Fantastic over here. Yeah, he was a little bit harder. Basically, he's sort of a wait for the right opportunity to strike kind of thing. He'll cling to a wall and launch a barrage of attacks, and then one of his attacks ends up being a giant one of his arms, which extends until it hits the ground. Then you have to grind on his arm, ram into him, and spray him a bunch. And then he'll move to the other wall and, well, rinse and repeat until it's over. Then we've officially dealt with the 2 big bads of the golden rhinos. Then we need to head to the skyscraper district to encounter Zero Beat, this guy here. Honestly, he's probably my favorite design character in this game. Anyway, once we talk to him, he'll run off to the site of the Tokyo line, where we follow him and we encounter another boss fight with this giant train thing, and it's all on rails. So you kind of just have to get close to it, but not too close or else you get hit. Spray it a bunch and it goes down. You probably might have also noticed that DJ Professor K is currently being hoisted by a helicopter. This is because after the second boss fight you deal with, the golden rhinos jump him and just take the entire station with them. I feel like it would have been easier just to kill the guy, considering he's giving us pretty damn good information, but I don't know, maybe Professor K is just way too cool to be even killed by assassins. He doesn't deserve a death like that, which is honestly an achievement in of itself. Then we head back to Shibuya Terminal, where we finally get to meet up with Goju Rikaku himself, the big bad. And he actually speaks in this game. He has proper voice lines and everything, and I can't really help it, but he sounds so familiar. So then DJ Rikaku now decides to inhale a bunch of people and turns them all into Zero Beats. You also end up doing a graffiti tag against a couple Zero Beats, but I don't really need to mention anything about it. Oh, and DJ Professor K gets free, and because he's now free and he apparently has a new setup, apparently he decides to rename the radio station Jet Set Radio Future. I want this man. And then he ends up inhaling us, getting to the final boss fight. Well, almost the final boss fight, because we need to do some platforming to actually access it. Also, get yourself some spray cans, just in case. Once you get up to the top, you'll meet up with Mr. Rikaku himself, where he'll transform into this demon thing called Akumu. I kind of find it interesting that they actually wanted to play on the whole, like, you know, summon a demon thing, like from the last game. You know, actually looking back on that whole plot point of the original game, this would just be something that Grunkle Stan would put on display in the Mystery Shack or something. Anyway, Akumu himself pretty simple boss fight. It's like most of the other fights in this game. You just wait for the opening and you wail on him. You will have to go back down for some more spray cans, but it shouldn't be too bad. I'd recommend picking a high health character for this one because you will take a lot of damage, trust me. And once you deal with Akumu, that's it. That's all of Jet Set Radio Future done and dealt with. DJ Professor K will obviously talk about how big CEOs will just ruin the fun, so we gotta stop them. And now that we're all done, everything's back to normal, we now get put into Chapter 9, which is basically the cleanup chapter. This is kind of the point where you can just kind of get everything you missed out on, but obviously there is one more thing we need to quickly discuss, and that are the test runs. So the final thing are the test runs. Essentially, this game's, well, post-game content. Now, honestly, most of it is just the same from the original game. You basically just get access to a bunch of these different challenges that grade you based on your performance. So essentially, it's just the original game, but now with this game's newer mechanics. You have 3 modes to choose from. First, you have to unlock this, and the unlock method is pretty simple. All you need to do is beat the campaign and collect every graffiti soul for each area of the game. Of course, you also have to do the street challenges, because they also give you graffiti souls. Collecting all of those will give you access to that level's test runs. Each level has 3 test runs, 2 of which will always be the same, and the last one is always dependent. The first 2 I won't talk too much about because they're just the same from the original game, being Jet Graffiti and Jet Technique. It's just the same stuff from the original game, just with the newer mechanics. However, the new ones, being Jet Dash and Jet Flag, are actually just the lap races and capture the flag game modes you've already done throughout the main campaign. This is where the dependency comes in, because depending on how the level is specifically designed, you'll either get Jet Dash or Jet Flag. If it's a level like, for instance, Dogenzaka Hill, a very linear level, you'll get Jet Dash, whereas a level such as Shibuya Terminal, which is a lot more open, will have Jet Flag as their main mode. Once you get a Jet rank for all 3 of these, you'll unlock a new character and another graffiti soul. Do all of these, get all the Jet ranks, and you have 100% of the game. So now it's finally time to talk about what I thought about Jet Set Radio Future as a whole. And in my opinion, yeah, it's a good game. I think a lot of the stuff here I definitely really liked, and honestly for a while I genuinely probably would have told you that it's just a definitive upgrade of that original game on the Dreamcast. But the more I really think about it, I think I prefer the original game a lot more, just mainly because of the removal of the ranking system for the campaign. I feel like it does a lot more damage to Jet Set Radio Future than you think it does. I mean, you could argue that like, oh, but it's in the test runs, which is true, and I definitely love the test runs, but I feel like removing them for the campaign just kinda makes it a bit bare, you know? I mean, it quite literally is just taking away a ranking system from any modern Sonic game, and I feel like Jet Set Radio not having a ranking system in its main campaign is such a detriment to this game that it doesn't make it outright bad, but I definitely feel like it'll be something that definitely sways the opinion towards the original Dreamcast game versus the Xbox One. Even then, I'd still recommend you try this game out, even if the only way you can play it nowadays is via emulation. And after Jet Set Radio Future, Jet Set Radio as a franchise would just kind of become a bit dormant. Not to the levels of, say, I don't know, Banjo-Kazooie, where they just basically die. It would occasionally pop up in some, you know, like crossover games like Sonic All-Star Racing Transformed. You know, you can play as Beat in that game, and you can also play as everyone's favorite Jet Set Radio character, the Pyro from Team Fortress 2. Jet Set Radio would also find its way to be the main inspiration for other games. One of those, of course, being Hover, Revolt of Gamers. And I'm not exactly going to be making a full video, or at least go in depth with a game like this, but I just kind of wanted to bring it up here to at least recommend it. Another game I wanted to at least mention is Ollie King. This is a game that a lot of people like to actually give the title of Jet Set Radio spiritual successor to, and And I would agree with that, mostly, in like the whole music and art department, though I wasn't able to play it for myself because I tried to get it to work on an emulator and it just wouldn't work. The gameplay that I found, or at least decided to watch, it's really just the precursor to Sonic Riders, and honestly, that is kind of crazy. Never thought I would actually see the main inspiration for Sonic Riders. That was not on my bingo card, but you know what, we take those. And yeah, that's just kind of the legacy that was left behind with Jet Set, just like maybe a couple fans who played the original, and that's it. However, in 2023 at the Game Awards, you know, the exact same specific event where if a developer was up on stage for more than 5 seconds, there was a sign that just told them to please wrap it up immediately. So one of the big trailers that Sega decided to drop was a bunch of revivals for some of their older games. Obviously, this is stuff like Golden Axe, Crazy Taxi, and of course, Jet Set Radio, which is getting a whole brand new game. And you can already tell because in the new Monkey Ball game, Beat was added in there, and he's also rocking his new outfit that is specifically in that game. So yeah, honestly, if for some reason you've never played Jet Set Radio before, perhaps now is more than a better time to try it out, because now it's finally time to talk about the main event. Now it's finally time to talk about Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, and the game wastes no time because we're stuck in the police bureau. Seems someone has entered and they're gonna close all the gates. Then the camera pans to our cell, and this guy. We play as this guy for like a maximum of 5 seconds before this guy shows up and decides to hit us with the most elementary school insult I think I've ever heard in my entire life. He then agrees to bust us out of prison, we follow him for a bit, and introduces himself. This is Trice. He is the leader of the Bomb Rush crew, and he could use our help a little bit. And this is Foe. Yes, that is how it's pronounced. I know it looks like it would be pronounced as Fox, but trust me, it's pronounced as Foe. But Trice, interestingly enough, replies and says that it's the Foe. So this just got a little bit interesting. Curious to see how this plays out, but who gives a shit? We got a boost pack. Yay. What's a boost pack, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you. It's essentially a double jump, but it also makes you look like Metal Sonic. Basically, this thing kind of acts as like a pseudo double jump, because obviously jumping, it's pretty much the same as Jet Set. So like whenever you jump in the air, there's a lot of drag, I guess. So you can't really make like massive sharp turns, basically. And this kind of allows you to make those sharp turns. I really like the addition of this. This is such a cool thing, and especially with its mechanics. And of course, the level designers can get a little bit cool with it as well. This is definitely a really cool ability, and I like it a lot. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, well, we're on foot. Yes, this is an actual thing that you can do in the game. I'll talk a little bit more about it just a quick second here, but one of the main benefits to being on foot is sliding. Pressing the right trigger, if you're using an Xbox controller, will basically shrink your hitbox, allowing you to fit into more tighter spaces. I know this ability definitely seems kind of whatever for the most part, but honestly, it's actually really good because it does have its own special properties compared to, well, your vehicles. Good segue, because we can talk about them now. You get introduced to, obviously, the roller skates, you know, a Jet Set Radio staple at this point, and you get to try them out on some grind rails. And obviously, because, you know, they're roller skates, you move a lot quicker than you do on foot. You can actually toggle between going on foot or using your preferred vehicle of choice. So after you do a bit of grinding and some graffiti, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the boost. You probably have already noticed this little bar in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. This is the boost meter. Essentially, there are 2 ways of obtaining boost in the game. The first way is with these canisters. They give you to these for free in the tutorial, just to sort of test the waters a little bit. The other way is just by doing tricks, which you'll learn about tricks in like the second half of the tutorial. To activate the boost, you just hold down the left trigger, your exhaust will turn blue, and what you saw can be pretty helpful for making long gap jumps since it's the fastest you can go normally, and is also pretty useful for something else I'll talk about later. And that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about with the tutorial, so let's wrap this up. So after all of this, you get into a little brawl out with a couple of police, but mainly Reitveld, and to be honest, she's kinda built like the foot soldier from Garden Warfare 2. And during the whole fight, Trice is over here at the door trying to lockpick it, but unfortunately his his lockpick skill is so fucking bad that it takes the entire duration of the fight to get this thing open. But when he finally does, he hits Foe with the "You white boy," and then
12 seconds later,
Foe gets his head cut off. Yeah, like straight up, like the character you've just been playing as for like pretty much 5 minutes just dies. And by a record player, no less, which is actually kind of metal as fuck though. Yeah, by this motherfucker who probably thinks he's Oddjob or something. And during this whole thing, Trice just slowly looks at him with the most nonchalant I don't give a fuck face of all time. So after that whole thing, Trice hits us up with the state-of-the-art Cyberhead, which even comes with its own operating system as well. There's like a 99% chance that this thing can run Doom. So after we wake up, Trice just kind of fills us in on the details, but the issue is well, this new guy doesn't know anything that happened. He's basically a blank slate at this point. He doesn't really remember what actually happened, if anything at all, really. So obviously we can't call him Foe anymore, because, well, he's dead now. So both Trice and also we meet a new character here, Belle, who, honestly, from what I can tell online, yeah, I think she's the favorite character in this game. I think I've seen the most fan art of this character, so died 2002, born 2023. Welcome back, Gum. Okay, so I'm kind of taking the piss a little bit here, but if I'm being really honest, I do quite like that the story goes more out of its way to sort of make these characters feel more like characters, in a sense. I mean, Jet Set Radio does have a lot of characterization, it's just a lot of the actual personality stuff just kind of gets sidelined in the manuals, you know, just like every other video game around that time. So like a good example of this would actually be Gum from Jet Set Radio Future here, where they sort of imply that she's the type of character that would, you know, hook up with a guy only to then dump him like 10 minutes later, you know? Though in the actual game, they never really acknowledge this much at all. They just kind of have her talk through a speech bubble where it just feels like she's not really that type of character. And then obviously when we get to Belle in Bomber Cyberfunk, obviously she's kind of written as a much more bubbly and super friendly character. And then obviously we have Trice, who we met earlier. He's a little bit more focused and cold, and he's also obviously the leader of the team, so someone like that is pretty much bound to be a leader of some kind. And so both of these two decides to come up with the name Red, which is honestly probably the best thing for me right now, because I really don't want to be called something stupid like Matthew or something. This is also the second part of the tutorial. This is where Belle kind of teaches you some simple stuff to do with grind rails as well as tricks. Tricks in this game, you just press X, Y, and then B in a rhythmic combo, and that's pretty much it. And I don't know, I think Belle might be into me or something. And then Trice will kind of give us a little tutorial on actual game mechanics, but we're not going to talk about that just yet. Trice also mentions that Foe was initially a part of the Big Three, but that's all we really get of it right now, so we're gonna have to wait a little bit to get some more information about that. But then he also hits us with the deal he made. Since he busted Foe out of prison, he has to join the crew and go all city with them, which is, well, what Red intends to do now. But also he wants to actually find Foe's head, and probably the best place to start looking is, well, with DJ Cyber, who is the leader of the crew Futurism. But that's a crew that we're not going to be dealing with for some time, so we're better off starting small and working our way up, which means we're now officially going on the All City Tour. So the first stop on our all-city tour is Versum Hill, which, fun fact, is actually based on a real place in the Netherlands, which is the area in which Team Reptile, the developers of the game, are actually located. The rival crew we're dealing with here are the Franks, and we meet them pretty quickly here. But before then, I should talk to you. You get a cell phone. Well, it's a flip phone, but still. Basically, this is just a cool, weird little menu where you can just play music and get text messages and stuff like that. It also serves as your map as well. This is where like a lot of the stuff that you'll be able to find in these maps will reside. But obviously, you probably might have also noticed that we're on a skateboard now. This is what I meant by the three modes of transportation. We have roller skates, which you saw earlier, skateboards, which is honestly for the majority of my time playing the campaign, this is what I use the most, and of course the BMX bike. So now let's finally talk about graffiti in this game. So graffiti in Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future were two very different things. The first game was a QTE, whereas the second game wasn't. This game, on the other hand, goes for a QTE, so similar to the Dreamcast game, but it's way quicker, it looks cool, and also the sound effect is also pretty nice to hear as well. The system is basically like, I don't know, those old Samsung phones where you had to like unlock it with like the little flow the chart pad or something. It's basically like that. Each graffiti piece in this game is actually all done by genuine real artists, which is all really cool to see. All you have to do is put in a specific combination and boom, the graffiti will be up on the wall for everyone in the world to see. You can switch it out whenever you feel like it as well, so it's not permanent. After we do our first one, we run into our first Frank member. He tries intimidating us, but I'm not gonna lie to you, you ain't the Bron James, so you ain't got shit on me. The camera pans to some Nikes, and then we can head over to the Versum Hill courtyard, where we can actually start, actually doing the stuff we're supposed to be doing. This is the main gameplay loop of the game. It's a pretty simple one, so let's break it down. First, you want to be going around and spraying a bunch of graffiti. This will give you some of these rep points, which is needed in order to progress. Once you receive a certain amount of rep points, there are 3 challenges that you need to do, so you need to reach a certain total 3 times. Honestly, this isn't too bad because all the totals are just super close to each other. And then you want to go over to one of the crew members and do their challenge. Most of these challenges are pretty simple. It's just like getting a certain combo or doing Simon Says. It's something specific like that. But one of these, specifically in Versum Hill, actually teaches you a new mechanic, being manualing. Manualing, yeah, it's just from Tony Hawk. Basically, manualing is a mechanic that allows you to keep your combo string going even after you've landed on the ground, which is usually what ends the combo. There's one thing about manualing though, is that when you're going down a slope, the bar won't actually decrease at all. But be careful because the manual doesn't last that long if you're on flat ground or going up a slope instead. And this also kind of segues into talking about the vehicles again, because for some reason the bike has the longest manual, skateboard is second, and then the roller skates have the lowest amount of time. But honestly, once you learn a certain trick I'll be talking about later, that becomes a non-issue. And with each challenge that you beat, you'll actually receive some new graffiti to use. This sort of replaces the graffiti souls from Jet Set Radio Future, as there are things scattered throughout all the maps. So obviously later on you'll want to explore and gather some of these things. You'll get stuff like graffiti and skins for your vehicles, and something else we'll talk about in the second chapter. There's also another challenge in here that also introduces a new mechanic, that being the corner boost. Now, the corner boost is really more or less a part of a bigger whole, and that of course being the score multiplier down here. Yes, it's another thing from Tony Hawk. You can lean on a rail, and whenever there's like a sharp turn, so a corner, you'll perform a corner boost. A corner boost will give you a quick burst of speed and adds 1 to your multiplier, and since there's multiple corners, you'll be wanting to do this quite a bit to increase your final score. Now, there are actually other ways of getting multiplier, like for instance, half pipes and billboards will give you multiplier as well. Obviously, you want to be trying your best to skate on some billboards and do half pipe stuff as well, not just corner boosts. Once you've beaten all 3 of these challenges, the rival crew will retreat to another area on the map where they will require even more rep in order to take them on, and then once you get that rep, you can finally take them on in a crew battle. However, this part, which is, I guess you could describe it as the second half really, gets a little bit more heated because the police show up. Well, specifically for Versum Hill, it's not too bad because each chapter will introduce a new police type into the mix, and the police in this game are basically back to what they are in the first Jet Set Radio, so basically just obstacles that you need to avoid. Or you can fight them like in Jet Set Radio Future, but I'll be honest, the fighting aspect of this game is not super good. Probably my least favorite actually. And also we have a GTA style star meter, but apparently it's called heat. Basically every time you paint a graffiti, that heat meter will increase by 1 star, but obviously because we're pretty early on in the game, it won't really go above 2. So what happens at 2 stars? Well, I'll tell you. You get these things. Basically they just try to grab your ankles or your wrists, pull you towards it, but you can easily counter it by doing a jump trick and then hitting it with a quick graffiti tag, and this will disable it for a short amount of time. But once you've gathered all of the rep, you head up to wherever the Franks are, but there's a little bit we have to do first before we do that, and it's mainly story stuff. It's here where we find the leader of the Franks, the Flesh Prince. He is the one that actually supplied Trice with the standard issue Cyberhead, the one that Red has now. And it's also revealed that, well, he has some information regarding DJ Cyber, but he's not gonna spill the beans. So Bell invites Red back for a little private chat, I guess, until they find a pile of old rusty Cyberheads. Trice will come in and, well, obviously tell you that he ain't gonna spill the beans, but the only way he can is if he beats him in a crew battle. So that's exactly what you decide to do. However, you're actually ambushed by the police again and have a rematch against Riotveld, and she dies just as easily as the first time you did it in the tutorial. Then we finally decide to go confront the Franks and challenge them to a crew battle, which is also when probably my favorite characters show up, the Old Heads. These guys are the oldest writers out there, and they kind of just serve as sort of referees whenever something gets a little heated on the street. And so now it's finally time to settle the beef, with the final act of each chapter being the crew battles. Essentially, the two teams will go head to head in a score attack mode, where you have to get as much points as you can in 2 minutes, and the winner and the team with the most points at the end of those 2 minutes will win, and of course take over the other team's turf. Honestly, when it comes to the actual team aspect, it's really more of a 1v3 because your AI teammates just are really dead weight. Your friends will also text you telling you, hey, remember to do this, this, and this, just to kind of give you a quick reminder, which, you know, is a bit bad when you actually decide to send it to me while we're in the middle of a crew battle. You could have sent it to me prior, but whatever, I'll just let it slide for now. And you know what? I had this realization, man, this would have been so cool for a multiplayer mode. I mean, I know Jet Set Radio Future had that one multiplayer mode that I didn't even bother playing. Like, if this crew battle thing was an actual multiplayer game mode where you could 1v1 someone in a score battle, that would actually be kind of fun. Like, I would actually fuck with that if that were a game mode. And the actual thing itself, yeah, I absolutely demolished them. Easy as piss. You ain't shit, Franks. And so now that we steamrolled them, we take the win and their turf. Now it's finally time for the Flesh Prince to spill some beans about DJ Cyber, or he could just show up himself. So here comes DJ Cyber in his goofy ass Eggman contraption, decides to scold the Franks for not willing to give the information and fold, but at the same time, Trice also brings up the fact that he did kill Foe the other night, and that he feels like they deserve some kind of information. However, the Futurism crew ends up actually holding them, so Red decides to do the absolutely unthinkable and actually rush down this guy and beat the shit out of him, only to get stopped by this chick. He also reveals here that he was actually a part of the Big Three as well, just like I mentioned earlier with Foe. But that's all he really reveals for right now. He decides to put us on an offer and put us in his contraption. You see, this contraption can sort of view the mind in a weird sort of way. Actually, you know what the best way I can describe it? It's just Psychonauts. If you played Psychonauts, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah. Then we make it to the main story aspect of the game, and that being, well, Red's mind. This is kind of when the game can get pretty creative with some of its visuals. I actually specifically like the opening one. It's all black and white, and there's like a single door, then you go inside it, and then the camera just flips instead of like going in the door, and then you're in like this weird like Venice city or something, and then you make it to the actual mind area. In this aspect, it's really just a simple platforming challenge. You make it to one graffiti spot where you tag it, and then you have a cutscene. Now this cutscene is interesting because you see obviously both Trice and Bell, but then Foe shows up and he does a little bit of instant transmissioning, and then he pushes you off, which is a bit odd, but okay. Red wakes up in a cold sweat, and when that happens, DJ Cyber will say, if we can achieve all city before DJ Cyber and Futurism do, then we can make him give us our head back. Then he fucks off, and that ends chapter 1. Meanwhile, back at the hideout, everyone's just kinda sitting around and reacting to what happened with DJ Cyber back at Versum Hill, until Red decides to ask Trice more about the Big Three, where Trice decides to give us the big ol' lore drop about who the Big Three are. The Big Three were 3 really highly talented writers in New Amsterdam. They essentially ruled the streets. There was Foe, DJ Cyber, and the third one being Felix. While they were presumably a part of a big group, they they kind of weren't, because they were all kind of rivals with each other and trying to go All City, but in the end, Felix came out on top. With him being All City now, he was essentially the best writer in all of New Amsterdam, and that's what inspired Trice to form Bomb Rush Crew. However, not everything good can last forever because, well, Felix was, well, as Trice puts it, and because of that, DJ Cyber decided to uphold the code of the street with an iron fist, now wearing the mask that Felix once wore, which rubs Trice the wrong way a little bit. Red realizes that Red thinks it's best if he goes for All City, because that'll probably bring him closer to what he wants. But before he can leave, Trice stops him and reminds him that they're a team, because yeah, Trice, we're... And so we head off to Millennium Square to face off against the next rival crew, Eclipse. Meanwhile, the police are discussing something regarding Foe mainly. They also mentioned that Foe's dad was actually a police officer, and that they could use him for something they call Project Algo, which Riotville's a bit iffy on. She seems it's probably a pretty bad idea to do it, but the police chief rejects that and just decides to go with it. Don't really know what Project Algo is, but I'm pretty damn sure we'll figure that out pretty quickly here. Welcome to Millennium Square. This is sort of the central city area where you get access to pretty much all of the other areas of the game. However, we don't have access to it, so we may as well just bomb the area while we can. So after bombing the area for a bit, Eclipse shows up and, well, when we talk to them, they'll just kind of send us on our way because, well, as they put it, Red doesn't really know a whole lot about women, and to be fair, yeah, I feel like someone who has lost his memory of pretty much everything probably won't understand anything about women if the only thing he ever thinks about is Foe and going All City, which gives us access to the Cypher. What is the Cypher? Well, apparently someone on that dev team really liked Donkey Kong 64, so much in fact that they basically copied the whole system from that game and put it in this one, because what you need to do is you need to find a black and white tile floor which is shaped like a square. Then what you want to do is you want to dance. Yes, you have emotes in this game. And then what happens is then a bunch of characters will show up and you can swap. Obviously, the game wants you to swap to Belle so you can talk to Eclipse, which is exactly what I did. I guess they'll try and insult you, and then they'll go to their home turf, Brink Terminal. This will obviously give us access to that area now. Welcome to Brink Terminal. This level is a bus terminal level, you know, just in case for those in back who didn't believe that Bomb Rush Cyberfunk was indeed a spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio. Well, here you go, here's the proof. And before we actually get into the bombing, we see the Eclipse girls talking to a dumpster, but as we investigate, we find out there's someone in said dumpster. This is Solace. He likes tight spaces. He offers to help us out by getting the Eclipse girls, but considering how they treated him, I don't think they're going to like that. Yeah, let's just do what Trice said. Let's not rely on him. Let's just get bombing. Yeah, I'm sure you probably know the drill at this point. Just go around, bomb everything, do their challenges, and whatnot. During this, however, Solace will end up calling you, or well, texting you, and if we decide to go investigate, he somehow got stuck there. I really don't want to know how you even got up there to begin with, and so once again, once you beat all the challenges, they'll scurry off to some other area where you need to get more rep. So then the police arrive, and we see this guy, his name's Lieutenant Escher, taking aim at the Bomb Rush crew, in which he then receives intel that they are carrying lethal weapons and that deadly force is required. So he shoots a warning shot. Bell tries to duck down, but for some reason, Red must be him because he just does not give a fucking shit about that, which obviously introduces the sniper. I'll talk about them in a second because I want to talk about Escher first. We jump on the roof where he is, and he demands that we drop our weapon, which is of course our spray can. Realizing that we may not have any lethal weapons, he decides to reveal that he too is a cyberhead and asks Red what his business here is, in which Red replies that he's looking for his old head, and then, well, Escher then responds by saying that what he's effectively doing is killing himself, which I guess I feel like I should explain what he means by that. So, like I mentioned with the cyberheads earlier, they're essentially second chances, meaning that if your old head dies, it gets replaced with the cyberhead. That cyberhead is supposed to have your old head's memories and everything, so it's basically like nothing ever happened, really. And the thing is that it's a weird oddity that a cyberhead like Red's just doesn't know anything that Foe knows. To which then Escher then implies that he shouldn't really be held down by his roots and instead just be judged by the actions of his new self, as if he were a new person. Red will then follow up by saying, Red will then ask Escher why he's even attacking us, to which Escher replies that he has his orders to confiscate the body that Red is currently using, which then starts the boss fight, which is incredibly easy because he'll just jump to one of 3 places in which you just have to get over there and then beat the shit out of him like 3 times and then he's done for. Which I guess while you're watching that, I guess we should talk about the sniper. So the sniper, well, here it says that it's actually the 3rd tier that gets added. That's kind of a lie because later on you'll quickly realize that they're actually the 4th tier. There's actually another one that gets added later, or I don't know, maybe they're added now. I just never really got that far, so can't really say. But the snipers themselves are a bit of a glass cannon. So basically, like Escher, they'll just kind of sit in a somewhat hard to reach spot, something that requires a little bit of platforming in order to reach. Then they'll obviously target you, in which you can see if they're trying to hit you, because you'll obviously see a bright red line, and you'll also see a little circle on the floor which shows you where they're specifically aiming at. They'll follow your position, but at a somewhat slow pace, so constantly moving in a single direction, you'll be able to avoid it pretty easily. So once they've got you in their sights, they'll quickly fire their weapon, in which it deals a pretty good chunk of damage, so you have to be a little careful. But if you can actually get to wherever the sniper is hiding, then all it takes is a single button press and they're done for, as they are the most frail enemies in the game. I'm pretty sure they're actually one tap as far as I'm concerned, so if you can get up to them, like, they can basically do absolutely nothing against you. So anyway, once you finally defeat Escher, Escher's knocked on the roof, or the floor I guess, in which he then asks Red if his crew had a gun on them at all. Red doesn't say anything, but Trice and Bell show up saying that, hey Red, we gotta go man, like we got shit to do. So then when Red looks back at where Escher was, apparently this dude's Batman and he's out of here. So we make our way up the tower to face off against the Eclipse Girls, and the old heads show up, which means it's time for me to absolutely mollywop the Eclipse Girls in a crew battle. So while you watch that happen, I guess we should finally time to talk about the music this late into the video. Reason being, this guy. This is Hideki Naganuma. That probably should have struck some fear in the hearts of you kids, because he's responsible for like pretty much all the tracks in the first Jet Set Radio and about 90% of them in the sequel. Like, this guy I feel like needs no introduction. He is an absolute god of funky music. I love this guy's music. It is so good. Stuff like Sneak Man, Concept of Love, Humming the Bass Line, Funky Dealer, Like This, Like That, Rocket On, all of this stuff, so good. So moving on to the BRC soundtrack now, Mr. Naganuma has only contributed 3 songs. This is mainly because there's a lot more variety when it comes to the OST, which is something I'm very glad about. His songs, which funnily enough are all in caps, we have Jack the Funk, The People, and Get Enough. Get Enough, I'd say, is probably Bomb Rush Cyberfunk's version of, I don't know, Live and Learn or something, because if you go on the Steam store page and just watch the trailer, yeah, they use this song. Though me personally, I'm more of a Jack the Funk kind of guy. I think that one's my favorite from Mr. Naganuma. Absolute gas, by the way. All of his stuff is super good. But speaking of, I did mention that there's a bit of variety in the music, and that's because there's a lot more artists and styles contributing to this game rather than just Mr. Naganuma himself. Stuff like Big City Life by Kid Canevel, Funk Express by Prox, Morning Glow by Don McLennan, Light Switch by Sky Blue and Navo the Maestro, Chrombies by Dr. Laser, Plume by Legove, Anime Break from Klaus Savine, 2 Days Off from Kilowatts, Spectres by Rayso, Feel the Funk from Sebastian Knight. All these tracks and then some are all really good, and I'd personally recommend you checking out all of them and see which ones you personally prefer. Though if I had to pick a personal favorite of mine, it would honestly have to go to Condensed Milk by Cyber Milk Chan. I don't know why, this song is just an absolute bop, and I think you should listen to this one. Actually, you will listen to this one after you finish watching this video, because this is like the best song in the game. You should totally play this song when you're going for the achievements of this game, because for some reason it essentially guarantees you that you'll get those score attack achievements on your first try. But hey, look, it seems as if that we finally beat the Eclipse Girls, which means it's finally time to go back to Happy Magical Mushroom Land, because it's time to go through Red's mind again. Well, this is something. This part isn't really super long because it quickly just goes straight into the platforming segment, in which probably the only thing worth mentioning is this cool sphere segment, which is like a pretty cool optical illusion, and that's pretty much all there is to this one. Once you spray it, the cutscene has some guy on a stepladder spraying some graffiti. Red gets his attention, in which he turns around and we see his face. He's got a bit of a beard going, and he has a tattoo of a wing on the side of his cheek here, but then he just falls down, and that's really about it.
Meanwhile,
Escher returns to the police bureau to tell the chief about the situation, in which the chief doesn't really get mad. Instead, he just takes Escher down to what I could only describe as the control room for Project Argo, in which he decides to hook him up to it, and his eyes blink red, saying that he now knows where to find the suspects, in which Red wakes up in a cold sweat, back at the hideout. Trice doesn't really blame us for taking a nap on the spot, the Eclipse crew is overrated anyway, in which Bell reveals the next crew that's been acting up, being the .exe crew. Well, I guess that means it's off to Millennium Mall to deal with them, which now starts Chapter 3. So back at Millennium Square, I decide to bomb the whole area, because why not, which obviously gives me the good opportunity to talk about the real third star, the Riot Soldiers. They're basically just the same as the first star, the normal police officers, but they just got riot shields now, and just they're a little bit more tanky, and that's it. So after bombing the area, I decide to head over to the entrance to Millennium Mall, where it's blocked off by some speakers, in which we hear a voice over to the corner where we meet Solace once again. Bell asks if he wants help getting out, in which he declines, says that he likes it, and says that he's claustrophobic. Trice taking the words right out of my mouth, and you know what? Because I'm a nice guy, I'll gladly tell you what claustrophobic means.
It means he's afraid of Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho! Stop it, Patrick, you're scaring him!
Anyway, he tells us that a old head decided to put all the speakers here and that we should go talk to him. And once we do, he'll let us through. Well, I mean, since I already got the rep for it, he let us through regardless, but this is something you'll kind of see throughout the rest of the game, but in every area there is a old head that is kind of guarding a wall of speakers, and once you get enough rep, they'll give you access to more of the area, which has obviously more graffiti for you to paint over, and that's really all they're there for. You'll occasionally see this throughout the campaign, and you can actually access it during the campaign. You don't have to save it for post-game. I did though. I saved all of this for post-game, which I'll get to that once we finish the campaign, of course. Welcome to Millennium Mall, home of the .exes. Well, not in this area anyway, you won't find them here, just some graffiti to bomb. But here is actually where we get introduced to this chick. Her name is Vinyl, and she's been the one that has been helping out DJ Cyber a little bit, and she wants us to follow her. The Bomber's crew finds it a bit suspicious, and I do quite like you can actually talk to them about it, and they'll kind of give their input on what they think about this whole thing. Holy shit, is that Beerus? And once we meet her at the top here, she'll actually want us to go into this warehouse over here to turn on a switch, which will activate a door that takes us to the other part of the mall. After doing that, she'll kind of reveal some things. Number one is that she's not really a bad guy, she's just simply working for DJ Cyber because, you know, she wants to make money. So you know what? You go girl, I respect the hustle, get that bread. And probably the second thing is that she actually knows something that we don't. But of course, in life, you have to work hard for it, so she'll only spill the beans once we deal with the .exes. And which you probably know how this story goes. You go around, you bomb the area, and you do some challenges. But before we move on, there's two things I want to briefly talk about. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the final mechanic introduced to you, being the boost trick. Now you may remember that I talked about this earlier, how the boost has something else you can do with it, and the boost trick is that thing. To perform a boost trick, all you need to do is press the boost button and the X button right after. This will give you a boost trick. Your character will do a bit more of an extreme trick, and then you'll also have a little sonic boom cloud come right out behind you, and then you'll also be hit with a sound that goes,
Damn.
to give you the cue that you've performed a boost trick. Now, what does this do exactly? Well, as far as I can tell, I think it gives you extra points, but I rarely pay attention to the score screen down here, so I don't really know. But what I do know is that I've been able to find two things that the boost trick does. The first one, and probably the least interesting one in my opinion, it gives you a little bit of extra speed, which can be used to make some, I guess, more gap jumps, I suppose. But in my opinion, the best thing about the boost trick is that it resets manual. I mentioned this earlier, but whenever you're on a flat surface or going uphill, your manual bar will go down. Performing a boost trick pretty much negates this completely, because it'll just reset the manual bar to back where it was as if nothing ever happened, basically allowing you to stay in manual for a long time. The only issue is that, well, your boost is limited, meaning that you need to make the most of it in that short time you have. Obviously, once you get a much higher trick combo, filling up the boost shouldn't really be too much of a problem, so effectively you can do it as much as you want. The second thing I wanted to talk about is going back to the slide, because it's here where we get introduced to one of the slide's main attributes, and that is, well, this. As you can see, there's no manual bar, but I'm on a flat surface. How is that? Well, it's with this. This is a specific surface that only allows slides to go infinite, allowing you to just hold a slide for as long as this path lasts. You can find this surface in the hideout, so if you want to try it there, go for it. And by the way, this only works for the slide, not any of the other manuals. If you try, it will just go down like normal. Only the slide will work on these surfaces. Now, the slide does have an extra attribute that will become very useful when we go for the achievements later on, but that's all I'll mention for right now, because now it's time to deal with whatever the police decides to throw at us again. So this time, the police decide to hit us with a double whammy. The first one here is the police surround us, and Red, I don't know why you're looking scared like that, just kick them in the face, man. The police get intel that we're dangerous and use of deadly force is required. Their eyes glow red, similar to Escher earlier, and then they decide to whip out their guns, turning them from total pushovers into genuine threats now, because as far as I could tell, I think they have hit scan, which is pretty bad if you know anything about old FPS games. Honestly, the best way I could deal with them is just zigzag them or start bunny hopping like it's Quake or something. They will hit you on rails a lot more because you're moving at a fixed speed, but yeah, you're supposed to defeat them, in which they'll send onto the actual big bad boss, being this giant tank mech thing. You're supposed to bait out its attacks when it hits the floor, then you can grind up its arm, hit this reactor core thing, which will make the arm fall off. You do it for the second one, and then you do it for the head, and it's gone. Or alternatively, make it follow you to a certain point on the map, get the high ground, and then jump on it from there. And that's how I defeated the first one. After that, the police will return to normal, and the normal officers will actually keep the pistols. This is essentially a permanent upgrade that they have throughout the rest of the game. But luckily though, not all of them have one. Some will just be the normal ones, but some of them will have these pistols. So it's not all bad. Once you deal with the police, we gotta go get some more reps so we can deal with the .exes, in which the old heads once again show up, which means it's crew battle time. And I absolutely mop the floor with these guys. So after beating the .exe crew, they'll actually tell the BRC about the existence of Project Algo, so that's pretty nice to know, I suppose. But then they walk off, in which Vinyl makes her appearance once again, applauding us of our victory, which obviously you know what that means, time for that info dump. But before she can do anything, it's cut short because after hearing a gunshot, turns out that said gunshot literally killed the leader of the .exes, like straight through the visor, just like Cat and Halo Reach. Red just kind of stares at it for a minute, and then he gets a headache, obviously taking us to Red's mind once again. So here we are, Red's mind again. There's a little building here in the middle with a giant fish you can interact with. Now, to tell you the truth, I basically got stuck here for a while. I just sat here for like 5 minutes not really knowing what to do, until obviously after those 5 minutes I just looked it up until I found out that you're actually supposed to boost into the reinforced glass, which for some reason breaks it. I don't think the game really tells you this at all, because they tell you that you can break normal glass just fine, just by jumping into it. I don't know, maybe this is one of those things where they just expect the player to just kind of like know, but I don't know. Pretty clear that I'm just proving to everybody right now that I'm a dumbass and don't know what I'm doing, so yeah, we'll just stop here. So anyway, we get into the platforming segment, which I kind of like how it's more stylized after the Millennium Mall this time, which kind of tells me that Red's getting more of his memory back. And speaking of his memory, we get another cutscene here, a little bit shorter, but still. We meet the guy again that we saw last chapter, in which we obviously ask who he is, and he actually replies, telling us to keep his ladder steady, but we can't because we're up here with him. So then the camera pans down to Foe, and Red says that, hey, maybe he can help, in which, well, after a couple camera pans and zooming, we then see a shot of a ladder falling over, to then Red wakes up. Trice will talk about how these blackouts aren't normal, and obviously it has something to do with DJ Cyber and that thing he put us in, and then Trice suggests that we book it because, well, the police are here. The police have surrounded the body of the .exe leader. Irene will show up and wonder if that guy has anything to do with the crime scene before them, in which we then get a bit of a flashback sequence where it's revealed that the police do in fact have the head of Foe, and she also remembers when she felt a bit uneasy about this whole Project Algo thing that she talked about earlier. The police chief Belage will talk about how big this is gonna be and that it's gonna change everything, and orders Irene to tell the lieutenant the very next day, to which she complies. So back at the hideout, as we're walking back towards the center, Vinyl can be seen sitting on the couch. Vinyl is fully intent on joining the crew, but as Trice is talking about how he feels a bit suspicious about her, Vinyl then spills the beans about Red, revealing that these blackouts and dreams that he's been having is his memories, and that they're slowly flooding back into Red. The more burrows he takes down, the more memories he regains, to which then Red asks if these memories belong to Foe, but then Vinyl brings up that they're someone else's. But before she can finish, Escher returns, pointing his sniper rifle point blank right at Red's head. And funnily enough, this is kind of like a callback to earlier when he hit Red's head and it did nothing. He then shoots again, which actually does deal some damage. Blood actually drips out, meaning that he actually hit his shot, which honestly is a lot more embarrassing considering he had to be point blank in order to do it. But before Escher can finish him off, Vinyl whacks him with a skateboard, causing him to go out cold, and this is basically the last time we'll ever see of Escher for the rest of the game. Red then takes his hand off of his cyberhead, which reveals that a chunk of it flew off, revealing that it's someone else's head. Weirdly enough though, this head distinctively has a wing tattoo on his cheek. But if you recall earlier, that guy we talked to in Red's head also has that same tattoo. So that means that the memories we're having are of this guy. But then that begs the question, who is this guy? What does he have anything to do with us? And more importantly, what is his relationship with Foe? Because surely he's a part of it somehow. At this point, Red is out cold, causing us to go find the Flesh Prince, which causes a bit of a wild goose chase of us going to Versum Hill, then going to In Millennium Square. It's also here where we meet this guy who is getting apprehended by the cops for a taxi, or being an unlicensed taxi driver. But we decide to show up just in time to help him out. This will unlock the fast travel of the game. You have to find these taxi spots first before you get access to these fast travel spots, but basically this will cut down on, well, obviously the whole walking / roller skating from place to place. That's pretty much it though. After that, we find the Frank, who makes us do a little bit of work to spray paint up here, in which he tells us that if we want to find the Flesh Prince, we'll have to go to Matan, which is one of the last areas of the game. After finding him, we ask him to come over and help us out Red, and so Red's head is fixed. Trice then hits the Flesh Prince with the Trice stare, to which then the Flesh Prince then talks about how he was given a head and was basically told to keep it alive, so he put it in the cyberhead. But the issue is that his head was quote unquote rotting, losing memories, until Trice shows up with a body that is pretty much a perfect fit, so he just gave him the cyberhead. Belle will then ask the Flesh Prince who that is, to which the Flesh Prince will not say anything, till Vinyl enters the conversation saying that he can't say his name because he's public enemy number 1, which basically then tells everybody else that he's basically Spider-Man. But now it's just the question of who this person really is, and well, the only way to find out is going to the next area. So here we are, welcome to Pyramid Island everybody, the 4th area of the whole game. Now before we actually get inside the island, we have to answer to this chick, Rise. She isn't really a part of the crew that we have to deal with here, she's just kind of a bystander. She won't let us through until we get 40 rep. Yeah, you kind of already know how easy that is. So once we get inside, the fun can begin, which means I can talk about the crew here, Devil Theory. And compared to all the other crews we've dealt with so far, far. I think they're definitely the meanest ones here. So mean, in fact, that you know what? I'm just gonna tell you right now. Devil Theory is by far the most creatively bankrupt crew name I think you ever could have ever come up with. With a name like that, I'm genuinely convinced that your leader is MatPat if he went through an emo middle school phase and decided to name his YouTube channel Devil Theory instead of Game Theory. Something pretty unique about this chapter. There'll be a certain instance in which once you beat one of the Devil Theory crew members, they'll actually lock you in a little box and force you to fight a bunch of police officers, which just goes back on what I said earlier about how Devil Theory is the bitchiest crew of all of them. Not to mention, I really don't understand how you couldn't have just fought me yourself. Instead, you had to call a bunch of police officers to do it for you. Absolute fucking pussy. So we give Pyramid Island a paint job and we do all of Devil Theory's challenges, which obviously means the police would show up here, right? Well, they do, but in a bit of an interesting way. Compared to all the other instances, they usually show up because they detect vandalism. This time though, or at least this member of Devil Theory will kick us down this height, I suppose. Red just doesn't really care at all. And then they'll announce that they've called the cops on us. And to the surprise of absolutely nobody, I forget Devil Theory, you should have just called yourself the Pussy Theory. Because of those stupid ass Halloween costumes, I'm convinced you probably couldn't even make a phone call to your favorite pizza restaurant. Anyway, the police are here, once again. We have the last police star that gets dropped onto us here, being the attack helicopters. And yes, your eyes do not deceive you, they look like the Hornets from Halo 3. I don't really have a lot to say about the attack helicopters, to be honest. They have guns and they attack you and they're airborne, making them pretty difficult to hit. So now it's finally time to take on Devil Theory. They know we're trying to rise up the ranks to take on DJ Cyber, only for them to talk about how they think DJ Cyber was the one who killed Felix and stole his mask. I mean, I don't believe you after the shit you just pulled. I'm very happy to say that Trice, absolute big man, calls you a bunch of rats. I mean, it's nowhere near the stuff I would have said, but you know what? I'm picking up what you're putting down, devs. I know what you wanted Trice to say. Anyway, so the old heads show up, and then it's time to finally whoop their ass in a crew battle, and yeah, you already know what happens. So while you watch me absolutely demolish the Devil Theory, figured I should probably talk about, well, the other thing that makes Jet Set Radio really, really interesting, and that is its art style. Now, Jet Set Radio is actually the first ever video game to have a cel-shaded art style. This is basically just a simple technique that just makes anything look a little bit more cartoony, and definitely adds to the whole vibe of this game. Everything in this game is super colorful and vibrant, and when you kind of compare it to its sequel, you can kind of quickly tell that the sequel is a lot more darker and grittier in terms of color, which is honestly why I kind of like the direction of the first game rather than the second one. But one thing that is consistent between the two of them is the graffiti slaps. The graffiti for both of these games absolutely slaps, and I absolutely adore it. And then of course, we have to talk about the character designs because, oh boy. Now, all of the characters, at least for the first game, were all drawn by Ryuta Ueda, who drew a lot of the concept art and is the lead artist behind the first game and second game. I can honestly go for about like an hour and a half talking about each of these characters and just how good they look. Like Piranha, Beat, Gum, Mew, Slate, Garam, like all of these characters look super good. Now, obviously, Jet Set Radio Future on the other hand, unfortunately doesn't actually have a lot of artwork for it, probably because they're all 3D models at this point, and for some reason there was no artwork for any of them. Any that I could find is like little to none, so yeah. And like I said, it goes for a lot more of a darker and grittier look. Obviously, the characters have been redesigned to fit the aesthetic of this game. You can kind of see what I mean by looking at two pictures of Beat here. You can kind of see that the future version has a lot more washed out colors and is a lot darker to fit the aesthetic of the game, whereas the original art direction was a lot more vibrant and colorful. There are some Jet Set Radio Future redesigns that I really like. For instance, Yo-Yo, I think his redesign is really good. I love the green hair, but there are some that I just don't really care for, like the noise tanks. Like, the old ones, in my opinion, look way way better. They just kind of have like this mad scientist look to them, whereas the ones in Jet Set Radio Future just look like Man Ray from SpongeBob. In my opinion, I think Jet Set Radio Future is a bit hit or miss in terms of the art direction, whereas I feel that Jet Set Radio 1, in my opinion, like, I just vastly prefer the more vibrant colors of the original. It just makes it pop away more, in my opinion. So yeah, I definitely say that while both of these two art styles are still really, really good, I think I prefer the first game. And then of course we get to Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, which I feel like that Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is just sort of a very good marriage between the two of them. It has the grittiness of Jet Set Radio Future, like it still feels a little washed, but it's still very vibrant like Jet Set Radio 1, but not as vibrant as Jet Set Radio 1. So Bomb Rush Cyberfunk's character design, I'd say, leans a lot more closer to Jet Set Radio Future than it does the original, at least in my opinion. And honestly, I think I love all the character design in this game. I don't think there's really one I actively dislike. All the character designs are just super cool. It's like eye candy, pretty much. Now, something I do actually find quite interesting about some of these characters is that they seem to borrow a lot of aspects from Jet Set Radio Future's characters. I don't really know how many there is in the game, but I will mention some that I did notice when I played it, namely with characters like Red, DJ Cyber, and Bell. I'll use these three as an example. We'll start with DJ Cyber. DJ Cyber, obviously, you know, he's the DJ, so probably Professor K inspiration there, which is sort of a no-brainer. However, I have noticed that his headphones have a very similar design to Beats headphones from Jet Set Radio Future, which I think is a pretty good detail. Moving on to Red now, I'd say Red seems to borrow quite a bit from Yo-Yo, simply because they have a very similar styled teal shirt here, and they both wear a red accessory on their head. Only in Red's case though, it's like the whole thing. Belle, actually, seems to be like a mix between Rith and Gum, honestly. She has like the hair of Gum, she has like the blonde hair, but she also has like a lot of the blue that Rith has, almost as if it were like a fusion between the two of them. Those are some of the design aspects I have noticed in my time playing this game, and I am sure that there's probably a bunch of others that I probably missed out on, so I don't know if there's any I missed out on, then feel free to drop it in the comments. It's actually kind of interesting to see where a lot of the inspirations really seem to originate from. So after we beat Devil Theory and they run off, they also mention that DJ Cyber has made his way over here, until after they leave, we hear the outhouse starting to make some ruckus, only for then for everyone's favorite claustrophobic masochist, Solace, to finally make his acquaintance. Trice just doesn't care, calls him a degenerate, until he ends up looking through Belle's photos until she finds the one that she took after Red got shot in the face, to which, to everyone's surprise, he actually knows who that guy is. But before Solace can answer Red's question about who he is, well, Vinyl then shrieks. So we decide to go investigate and see what's going on up there. We're just gonna ignore it took me about a whole hour to figure out how to even get up there to begin with, only for, well, DJ Cyber to hold Vinyl in a chokehold above this thing. It's at this point Cyber realizes that he's been double-crossed, and that he decides to trap Vinyl in this little area, for now, I suppose. DJ Cyber's here because he's aware of the Bomb Rush crew making their way up in the ranks, so he's decided to come and confront them here. This is when Red just comes in and challenges him to a 1v1, to which, funnily enough, DJ Cyber actually agrees. So like, hell yeah, let's throw down, big man. Final destination, no items, Fox only, you're on, bitch. So in the DJ Cyber boss fight here, basically he'll just park his little machine in one area of the arena, and then he'll start flinging his record blades of doom at you. Red decides that he's just gonna straight up parry one of them, knocks it back into Cyber, so then you can give him the smackdown, and then he'll just kind of jump to another area, rinse and repeat till we get to phase 2. Phase 2, a little bit different. He'll now just kind of make laps around this little, I guess, racetrack area, and you'll just kind of drop bombs or mines. You just need to start booking it and avoid as many bombs as possible. Then you'll just park his contraption somewhere, start flinging those record blades of death, and then you just parry them back into him, give him the smackdown, which ends the boss fight. DJ Cyber will do a bit of a face reveal, but then DJ Cyber hits a trigger word which causes Red to collapse, knocking him out and putting him back in his mindscape area. Now, this memory part of the game is probably the biggest one because this is where the big reveal happens. You can tell because he's using someone else's body right now. So you kind of already know what happens, just a bunch of platforming and then obviously the graffiti piece at the end. What you're here for is the big reveal. As the camera pans, we see Vinyl. She's having a conversation with someone and reveals to everybody that she's talking to Felix. And Felix is talking about something to do with Foe and believes he can change, implying that there's something going on with Foe, which I feel this was actually mentioned a while ago, because I feel like this has something to do with the fact that Foe's dad was a police officer at one point, or possibly still is. So I feel like that might have to do with something regarding Foe and how that affected him and his relationships with Felix and Cyber at the time, but we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. Then we cut back to a similar billboard with Felix standing on top of it, Foe's holding it, in which Foe then asks Felix why he doesn't have a boost pack like him or Cyber, and when Felix is about to answer the question, it all suddenly comes back to him. It's revealed to everybody that Red was Felix the whole time. Red wakes up to find both Cyber and Vinyl just kind of standing there, I guess, to which Red decks Cyber in the face. Finally, someone had to do it. As it turns out, Cyber and Vinyl were in on the whole thing. This was just all an elaborate scheme to bring back Felix from the dead. We don't necessarily know how they got to this point, but we'll probably find that out pretty quickly. And well, this is also the point where Cyber reveals everything to do with Project Algo. Foe is Project Algo, and that he's feeding the police misinformation to completely wipe out all the writers. And the reason they needed Felix to come back is that he knew Foe's weakness, meaning that he could put a stop to Foe and his scheme, whatever it is he's planning to do. But unfortunately, Felix doesn't exactly know what that weakness is yet, to which Vinyl reminds us that we need to go All City in order to remember everything, which means we're gonna have to go to the final area to bring back all of Felix's memories. And of course, before we leave, Solace has to enter the conversation and asks to join our team, to which Trice responds,
No.
Bell will let him join, and we make our way back to the hideout. Meanwhile, back at the police bureau, seems something's going up, because we hear a gunshot, and as Irene and a couple police officers run inside to investigate, we see the dead body of Belage on the floor. Irene goes up to Project Algo / Foe, asks what happened, in which Foe's plan is revealed to all of us. The reason why he's become Project Algo isn't to stop graffiti, it's so that he can wipe all the writers out so he can be crowned as the quote-unquote all-city king, which is, funnily enough, the only full-voiced line in this entire game. It's at this point where the police turn on Irene, and her fate is left up to interpretation. So, I guess it's finally time we talk about the final area of the entire game, Matan. Welcome to Matan, everybody, the final area of the game. And yes, it does look like Speed Highway from Sonic Adventure. Now, this area is probably the hardest out of all of them, probably due to the overabundance of bottomless pits you can end up falling into, and a lot more, well, significantly more difficult platforming challenges. Now, obviously, the team we're dealing with here is Futurism, and they're probably the most dangerous crew out of all of them, but honestly, after the shit I had to deal with Devil Theory, I don't think they should be as bad. Now, obviously, you already know what to do. Go around, get rep. Once you have enough, go take on their challenges. Now, what I actually like about Matan specifically is how it's structured, because it's actually structured a lot more linearly, in the sense that each member of Futurism will actually have a barricade next to them preventing you from accessing more of the level, and once you have completed their challenge, the barricade will vanish, giving you access to more of the level, and then you kind of make your way to the next barricade and rinse and repeat until you have all the challenges done. There's no new police stuff. As I mentioned previously, the Halo 3 Hornets were indeed the last thing. So before we talk about the crew battle with Futurism, I wanted to briefly mention the new mechanic that is told to you at this point in the game, that being the short hop. Basically, to do a short hop, you need to hold right trigger and press the jump button while on a rail. This will perform a short hop, and this is supposed to sort of keep your momentum going. I mean, not like your momentum was that fast to begin with, but it is something to keep in mind, I guess, when doing races or something. Thing is though, So I don't really think this is a mechanic that's that useful. I didn't really use it all that much throughout the campaign, and I don't think you really need it anyway, which I guess makes sense considering they tell you about it this late into the game, so I think even the developers know about it. But this is the last mechanic that you get introduced to, so if you thought that was the trick boost that I mentioned earlier, sorry, I lied, probably because this thing is relatively forgettable, so can't really blame me. Anyway, the crew battle against Futurism, the last one as a matter of fact, and yeah, we absolutely clap them. And there we go, we've done it, we've gone all city, but we're not finished because obviously we need to deal with Foe, so DJ Cyber whips out his machine and we step in one last time to finally recover Felix's full memory. So here it is, the final Mindscape portion of the game. This one's another favorite of mine because it opens kind of like the inverse of the first one, where the first one was all black and white outlines. This one's all white now with just a bunch of black birds really, and one really big black bird. Behind said bird is Felix, and for the platforming segment of this Mindscape section, we actually get to play as Felix for a little bit, but obviously we're here for the cutscene. Now the cutscene that we're gonna watch is the full thing, the full death of Felix, and Solace actually ended up being a full witness for the whole situation. Foe asked the question that he asked in the last big major cutscene back in chapter 4. This time Felix will answer that the reason he doesn't use a boost pack is because he only has one wing. And, well, Foe sort of murmurs to himself that how much can that one wing carry you? So he sweeps the ladder from under Felix's feet, causing him to fall to his untimely demise. DJ Cyber and the Flesh Prince were the only witnesses of the aftermath, seeing his body just lifeless on the floor with probably his decapitated head. I also quite like that when DJ Cyber picks up Felix's mask, it has a massive streak of blood, which is actually the key art for DJ Cyber, which, you know what, nice touch, I quite like that, and it's also the inspiration for the thumbnail art in case you didn't know. And with that, Felix's memory has been completely recovered, and it looks like we were just in time because we just watched one of the members of Devil Theory get absolutely pummeled. The tank walker emerges as it's revealed that Devil Theory had to deal with the police, not surprising. And listen, for as much as I love watching Devil Theory get smacked upside the head, I kind of already had my fun in chapter 4, so luckily though, Solace steps in to defend, but at the same time he ends up revealing that Red was Felix the whole time, so yeah, nice job numbnuts. That's when Felix and Foe have a bit of a conversation going. Foe will talk about his ideology of graffiti, how he treats it as war, and that if he eliminates the competition, that means he can become the Old City King. That's when Felix will come in to say that he's wrong and that the graffiti is a competition where nobody gets hurt. He says that we have to follow the rules of society, and that graffiti would be hella boring if it were legal. To which then Foe kinda changes the subject, talking about how he's felt betrayed by Felix after he went all city because he dropped Foe, so he intends to return the favor, just with a bit more lethality, entering the boss fight, which is just the same boss fight from chapter 3, so it's over pretty quickly. Foe stumbles back and falls to his untimely demise. That's when Trice finally makes up his mind, and that friendship ended with Foe. Now my new best friend is Felix. Surprise! Turns out that isn't the final boss, and that Foe had a backup plan, or maybe this was his plan and that tank walker was just a facade, I suppose. Anyway, he quickly swoops in, snatches Red, and just grabs his head and snaps it off. Just like that, he's dead again. He quickly picks up Solace and scurries off, and well, we're probably boned at this point because now the one guy who was going to stop him, who knew how to stop him actually, is now gone. So we're kind of fucked. But don't worry, because Irene just comes in clutch, and she brought with her Felix's old body. How did you have that? She mentions that because the entire police force has been completely corrupted by Project Algo, that she's decided to team up with the BRC, mainly out of necessity. And you know what? Yeah, good point, Trice. We do deserve diplomatic immunity after that. We'll handle that probably afterward. So Felix is pretty much back to normal at this point, minus the red head, and we spray these hands to open up the lion's mouth so we can get access to a bit of a platforming section before we take on the final boss, as we see it just climb all throughout the city like it's a kaiju or something. We get a pretty cool shot of the crew, like damn, we really do look like Sonic heroes. And Vinyl's here too, I guess. Then we all jump on the rail and go take the fight to Foe. So on to the final boss fight now. It's a pretty simple one actually. You're on rails for the majority of it, and basically you just have to avoid its 2 attacks. And when the arms overheat, you spray the little fusion core thingy, and then the arm will blow up and fall off. So really, it's very similar to the Tank Walker, only this time there's 6 arms instead of 2, so yeah. Honestly, this fight will probably prove to be pretty difficult, especially because of the machine gun attack, because there's like a 90% chance that every single bullet will hit you. If this happens, simply just jump off, take the hit, and just wait for your health to recharge to full, and then go back. Other than that, that's probably the only thing you'll really need to worry about in this fight. So after we beat the boss, Foe and Felix will have a little conversation where Felix finally reveals Foe's secret, and said secret was that he kind of cheated to get to the position he was in. He basically framed other writers for his graffiti, and I'd assume that those writers were probably apprehended. So yeah, technically Foe got to this position by cheating, and Felix mentions that he trusted him. I kind of find it a bit upsetting that Felix, how he talked about Foe, he really believed that Foe could change and that they could just stay friends, but unfortunately Foe just doesn't care, and he's decided to go all in on this whole Project Argo thing, unfortunately. So when Felix goes in for the final hit, as he's closing his doors again, everyone holds it open to let Felix give Foe the smackdown. He headbutts him so hard that the cyber head just shatters, which is insane because it took a sniper bullet at point blank range to knock a piece of it off, and one hit to this kid's skull and that whole thing's gone, which is kind of insane. So as Foe falls back and everyone's just getting out of there, Solace escapes and saves Felix at the last second. As we watch Project Argo fall, the camera, then we see the same scene where Felix fell, but instead it's replaced with Foe, which I thought is a pretty cool way to end the game. Back at the BRC hideout, Trice makes the announcement that BRC has officially gone all city, so everybody starts boogieing down and having a good old time. Meanwhile, Felix and DJ Cyber are just kind of hanging out with each other. Felix thanks Cyber for his aid, in which Cyber decides to hit us with a sequel bait, and Felix goes to hang out with his new friends and celebrate his achievement. And that is the end of the story. And that is the story of Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. Yeah, it was pretty good actually. Honestly, in my personal opinion, this story just kind of does what Jet Set Radio Future does more, but like more realized really. Future's story was just more of a longer version of that original story, but they didn't really take anything else into account. But what I like about Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is that, well, it kind of does what I think Jet Set Radio Future should have done. It's a lot shorter, so it doesn't overstay its welcome like that game's story did, like with the characters and how they interact, and also how we watch the police force slowly get corrupted. Like, it's a good story. Like, it's, you know, nothing major. It's not like Sonic Adventure 2 or anything, but I enjoyed it. It's pretty good. And it's got a good message at the end as well. So, yeah, I'd recommend checking it out. But we're not done just yet because we still have a post-game to talk about. Now it's time to talk about the post-game. To start off, you can talk to Trice, who'll let you know about the maps, where if you grab one of them, you'll get access to every other piece of graffiti you have yet to bomb. There's one new map you can find in every area, and honestly they're not really too difficult to find, so you'll more than likely just run into it at some point, and you'll just get access to all the remainder graffiti spots you need to get. So what's the first thing on the agenda when it comes to the post-game? Well, I think a good place to start would actually be the unlockable characters. Well, kind of. The first 5 characters I want to talk about specifically are the ones you can unlock during the campaign, only I never unlocked them during the campaign and unlocked them here instead. These characters include Rave, Mesh, Shine, Rise, and Coil. These all kind of work the same, they just have a side quest chain that you need to complete. It's about 3 of them, and they're really, really easy, hence why I mentioned you can unlock them during the campaign. And also, these specific 5 members will actually show up at the BRC hideout, as long as you're not playing as them, of course. So, kind of in a weird way, they're sort of like canon additions to the crew. Out of the 5, though, I would honestly say my favorite has to go to Rave. I think it's just the halo on her head, man. I think that just looks dope as hell. Usually one of their missions will require you also to unlock an unlockable area of the map. Basically, you have probably already seen it, but back in some older footage, I ended up talking to one of the old heads in Millennium Mall. Usually they'll be seen guarding some speaker boxes which form a barricade, similar to how we got into Millennium Mall in the first place. If you have enough rep, you can get access to a different area. These areas, like for instance in Versum Hill, you get access to this underground mall area, or like in Brink Terminal, you can get access to the pier, where actually a pretty cool detail about it is that you can actually see Pyramid Island in the distance, which is pretty cool. Or like in Pyramid Island, you can get access to this maze filled with freight crates everywhere. And also there's this one part where if you jump down here, you'll find this one room with all these weird buildings, a tree, and some old murky water with a shopping cart in it. This actually brings up a conversation about old Amsterdam. There's actually a second location, actually in the underground mall in Versum Hill. What you want to do is you want to grind up these snake statues, then you want to just jump to this ledge, then to that one, and then the one with the giant billboard on it. On the right hand side, you'll find a vent. This will take you to probably the biggest area of Old Amsterdam. It's just a long corridor with branching pathways that don't really lead to anything. Really, it's more of what the hell happened here kind of vibe. It's so eerie. Reminds me a lot of the opening to Half-Life 2, where that opening just felt so desolate and eerie, you know, with the whole Combine takeover and everything. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. There is also this one room with a sarcophagus that has a very similar design to Felix's mask, which means that this has some sort of significance to Felix. This is something that will probably be explained in further games, but we won't really know until that happens, to be honest. So back to playable characters now. You can unlock characters like Flesh Prince or Irene in the game. They're basically just as easy as the 5 other characters previously, you just need to do a pretty basic task. So instead, let's talk about the big challenges for unlocking characters. That being characters like any of the rival crew members and DJ Cyber. I don't really need to show all of them because they're all unlocked the same way, so let me kind of give you a basic description. Basically, it's just score battles like in the crew battles of the campaign, but these are a lot more hard, because these are a lot more difficult because they require you to get a crazy amount of points. If you know this game inside and out at this point, this shouldn't be too much of a problem, and once you obviously get over that amount of points, you'll unlock the character. Now, there is one last character that you can unlock, and that is the Old Head. Yes, he is a playable character in this game, and to get him, you need to bomb every single piece of graffiti in the game, which just so happens to transition into the game's achievements. When it comes to the achievements of Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, you can kind of split them into 2 different categories. The first one are the completionist achievements, which is, well, pretty self-explanatory. And then we have the Misfit achievements. These ones will require a little bit more explaining, so we'll start with those. These achievements are just oddly specific. Like, they're relatively specific in a niche sort of way. Like, for instance, there's this one achievement for Brink Terminal that requires you to get rid of the birds, like in this top area here. Yeah, it's only specifically these birds and not any of the others. And by the way, you have to sort of do it like where the camera is facing towards the face of your character, like it's a Crash Bandicoot chase level or something, and you just get rid of the birds and voila, achievement. That's the kind of specific achievements we're dealing with here. Some of these achievements have pretty funny names, like this one that just tells you to go outside, but I think the least funny one has to be this one. I'm just gonna call it Reddit, and I'm just gonna zoom in here, and I don't need to explain anything else. Moving on, we have the graffiti achievements. These are the more completionist side of things. Like I said, pretty self-explanatory. This one, you just need to bomb every piece of graffiti in a level. Once you get the map, you should be able to find these pretty easily. The thing is, though, is that the police will probably be a bit of a nuisance, so hop inside one of the outhouses to get rid of them, which, yeah, I kinda didn't really talk about this mechanic yet, because to tell you the truth, I never actually used it in the campaign. Maybe like once or twice, but like I never actually really used it properly. Basically a hard reset for the cops for some reason. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just some kind of law in New Amsterdam that apparently if the cops are just chasing someone, if they just hop inside of a porta potty, they just, shit, we can't get them. Pack it up, boys, it's over. You can also swap outfits in here as well, which are these unlockables that you can find throughout the map, and they're mainly just just palette swaps, so not all of them are going to be winners for me, but the ones that are good are really good. I'd say this specific outfit for Belle is probably my favorite of hers, or like this outfit of DJ Cyber, like I think it just looks absolutely incredible. And the last set of completionist achievements are these score attack ones. These achievements obviously require you to get a pretty big amount of points in order to get them, and this is probably where you would probably think these are the most difficult ones, but like I said, you probably should have a good understanding of this game and its systems at this point, so that these aren't really such a problem. Honestly, most of the time, I actually managed to get like double the amount that you're supposed to get for these areas. The highest it goes, by the way, is about like 16 million. However, there are some helpful tips I can probably talk to you about, specifically in areas like Pyramid Island, where that level is entirely vertical. It's probably best to start your score attack around in this upper area here. The only problem is that once you fall down, you have to make your way all the way back up. But luckily, if you just so happen to be going after these little guys, this should help you out a ton. I didn't really go after them much throughout the story. I think I just did a couple of them in Versum Hill and maybe Brink Terminal, but honestly, you should go after them. Basically, they're just little mini score challenges that kind of require you to use the manual a bit. It kind of teaches you how to keep a score going, so this is kind of like Bomb Rush Cyberfunk's version of the street challenges from Jet Set Radio Future, and once you get all of them, they'll unlock a little door. This can give you some clothes, graffiti, or a music disc, but more importantly, quick little fast travel segments to get from one part of the level to the other. One of these just so happens to take you right where I said you should start a score attack combo in Pyramid Island. You can also find one in Matan and Millennium Mall as well, but they aren't in areas like Brink Terminal and Versum Hill, probably because they're a lot more smaller levels compared to the latter half where they're way bigger. And to tell you the honest truth, that isn't even the last achievement I got for this game, because actually the real last achievement was Photogeneric. Basically this achievement, you just have to go around and take a bunch of pictures of this guy. This is Polo, the scuba mascot. I don't know what he's a mascot for per se, but I don't know, he's just a mascot. Around every single one of these levels, you need to find 17 of these Polo scuba mascots, and you can get the achievement. Yeah, it's one of those misfit achievements I talked about earlier. I would show you the last one I got, but unfortunately, I accidentally paused OBS, which, yeah, I didn't get the final footage of the achievement, so here's a picture of it to at least prove to you that I do indeed have it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. So before I actually decide to end this video, I wanted to actually dedicate a little segment to modded content for Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, because believe it or not, yes, this game does have a modding scene, and it's kind of incredible. I actually really like playing mods for certain games that I really like, because it kind of gives these games almost a new life, in a sense. Like, it just kind of gives a game that doesn't really seem to have much infinite replayability, and Bomb Rush Cyberfunk definitely is one of those games, at least for me in my opinion, and you're kind of bear witnessing to it. Now, there's not really a whole lot to talk about, which is why I'm kind of not really gonna bother making a sequel video or something. I'd rather just make a dedicated segment for this video instead. Also, if you want to download these mods for yourself, I've left a link to them in the description, and I've also left a link to the Thunderstore page where you can download that. Thunderstore, by the way, is just a mod manager that I use for this game, and quite a lot of other people use as well. So I'd recommend downloading that, or R2 Modman if you don't really like intrusive ads much. But anyway, let's get started with character mods.
This is the most obnoxious thing I've ever experienced in my life.
So character mods in Bomb Rush Cyberfunk are pretty easy to explain. Basically, you just kind of either add a new character, or you just kind of replace a model of one and just replace it with a character, like Sonic the Hedgehog for instance. You can also play as Shadow and Silver as well. How about Charlie from Smiling Friends? How about Kirby? We can just make Kirby Air Ride 2 happen. All you needed to do was just put him in Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. Or how about Perfect Cell? Hell, even the fucking noise from Pizza Tower can be in the game if you want to. And honestly, that's just only really scratching the tip of the iceberg here. There is so many mods for characters in this game. OCs, or just random characters to throw in here, because why the fuck not? Like, I'm genuinely convinced that character mods are probably the most plentiful mods you'll find for this game, and they're all going to be available on Game Banana. New mods get added to the website basically almost every day, so so perhaps you want to keep an eye out and see if there's a character that you just want to have some fun with in the game. So you may have also noticed that I'm moving at breakneck speed here. This is because I've actually downloaded the Movement Plus mod. The Movement Plus mod is probably the most downloaded mod for this game. If you ever see a modded video of Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, they probably have this mod installed. So what does this mod do then if people downloaded it so often? Well, it basically adds onto the movement system in Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, tweaking some of the systems to make it a little bit more interesting. Those tweaked things is like what the game considers a corner boost. Pretty much anything is now a corner boost, even rounded edges for some reason. I don't know why, but you know, I'll take it. And probably the biggest thing is your speed. The speed of this game has been increased dramatically. You can achieve breakneck speeds as if it was nothing. It's like jumping from Sonic 1 to Sonic 2. You also have some new moves as well, like a fast descent, really helpful, and you can also use your boost to get a pretty sweet speed boost on rails. I would also personally recommend you to use the base game movement before trying out this mod, mainly because I feel like this is one of those mods where you kind of play it and then you're probably never gonna be going back to the base game's movement. I actually ended up getting the Versum Hill score achievement using this mod. I didn't even realize that I had the achievement at the time because I was just having so much fun with it that I just kind of accidentally got it without even really realizing. If it were me though, I would actually personally recommend you to play the vanilla experience first before trying out this mod, just so that you don't get hit with any kind of inevitable disappointment at some point when you play this game for your first time. So the last group of mods I wanted to talk about are map mods. These ones are somewhat similar to character mods in a sense, only this time it's just with, well, maps. The first one I wanted to talk about actually is, well, Emerald Coast from Sonic Adventure. This is actually probably the most downloaded map mod, I think, and for good reason as well. Compared to a lot of other maps, this one has a lot more effort put into it because obviously a lot of these maps are gonna not really be built for Bomb Rush Cyberfunk in mind, so they have to kind of cut some corners, and out of all of them, I think this one definitely has the most effort put into it. Probably the first thing being a lot of the grind rails. This is mainly just to kind of take you from place to place rather than the level feeling somewhat very straightforward like in the original Sonic Adventure. Not to mention they also had to take out the whale chase from the original Emerald Coast, I'm assuming because of, well, it just wouldn't fit in Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. But there are some cool things they've added, like for instance the Chaos Emeralds. Yes, you can go after the Chaos Emeralds in this, and they're hidden throughout the entirety of this level, so you'll have to pay some close attention to where they are located. If you collect all 7 of the Chaos Emeralds, you can actually get access to the Chow Garden down here. Another cool thing about it is that there's also a Mario Kart track, for whatever reason. Just step into this ring and you'll be taken to Koopa Beach from Mario Kart 64. But in my opinion, the best part about this whole map is that you can just watch the entirety of the Sonic OVA on this little TV here. Speaking of Sonic, there's like a lot of other Sonic themed maps, mainly stuff from like Sonic Adventure 2, there's stuff like Radical Highway, there's Shadow the Hedgehog with like Lava Shelter, there's Egg Fleet from Sonic Heroes, and hell, someone's even gone ahead and ported the entirety of Soliana into this game. So even Sonic 06 is getting some love. But we even got some Tony Hawk maps, which is honestly not all that surprising, but hey, at least it's here. We have stuff from Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3. Call up your friends and bring them to a good old round of Halo Capture the Flag on Blood Gulch. And hell, they even got the vehicles from the original Combat Evolved in this game. Don't get in the tank, it kinda sucks. You've got Coconut Mall from Mario Kart Wii, and I'm not exactly super surprised, but yes, I think pretty much every single Jet Set Radio Future map is in this game. Or you can play Silent Hill 64. Scariest game of all time, apparently. Well, I mean, look at this Chain Chomp. He's watched that one YouTube essay video, and since then, he's been scarred for life. So to cap off the mod section, I guess we'll finish things off with a little lightning round with a bunch of other little mods, I guess, starting with Boost Colors. Boost Colors is a simple mod that simply allows you to change the color of your boost. Pretty cool. Next, I wanted to talk about Quick Style Swap. This is a mod that allows you to swap between skateboards, rollerblades, and BMX bicycles on a whim, as opposed to having to constantly keep going back to the hideout to switch, or or alternatively just switch to a character who is already using the move style of choice, basically making it much less of a hassle. There's final score display. This one simply just displays what your final score will be instead of you having to eyeball the math equation and solve it at the same time. There's custom graffiti, which simply allows you to add your own custom graffiti into the game, as long as it fits the right file size of course, but pretty much your imagination is the limit. And speaking of imagination is the limit, there's also Bomb Rush Radio, which is pretty much the same thing as the custom graffiti, but just instead with music. You can add your own custom music into the game now. It can be literally anything you want it to be. No matter how out of place the music may seem, it's just nice that I can listen to Minecraft music in Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. We also have stuff like Bomb Rush Camera, which simply is a free cam mod, allowing specifically for you little fellow video editors out there to make some stupid shit. Like for instance, we can just kind of throw in, I don't know, Red over here, and then we can have him go up against, I don't know, Ultra Instinct Goku or something, and I think you know how this fight will end up going. You also have BRC post-game characters, a mod that simply allows you to play as certain characters that aren't normally playable in the game, like Foe or Red Felix for instance. Although technically it is a map, there's also a green screen mod. You can also use this for fancy editing along with the FreeCam mod, so you can make the most, hopefully, funny thing imaginable. And the final mod I wanted to talk about is Slop Crew. This is a multiplayer mod for Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. It works like an MMO, so basically you just see people playing the game in real time, and it's honestly pretty cool. You can just interact with different players, you can have a little bit of a dance party. That's not all though, you also have access to an in-game chat where you can just have pretty basic conversations. I quite like that they also decided to add an option to say that you're using tilt controls. You can actually also engage in score battles and races. Although you can't use any advantageous mods, like for instance Movement Plus, which gives you a massive advantage. You can also connect your Discord account to the official Slop Crew Discord server in order to actually create and join crews, which is pretty cool until you realize that the current player base for this mod has the same amount of players that Concord did before it died. But it's not all bad, however, because I did end up meeting this guy. We were both rocking Shadow, so that was pretty cool. So to whoever this big slopper was, hope you're doing alright, man. And there we have it, a full-on 2-hour-long video about me yapping about a dead gaming franchise from the 2000s, and then an indie game inspired by those dead games from the 2000s. So what did I think about this series of 2 games as a somewhat newcomer? Honestly, I think I really enjoyed these games. These aren't really my favorite games ever made, because I feel the more I really think about it, the more I want to treat Jet Set Radio as more of a platformer, rather than an actual extreme sports game like Tony Hawk. It's pretty obvious that this game is way different compared to that game, as like I said, it's a lot more focused on platforming with those extreme sports elements. It's an interesting take on the platformer genre that not a lot of people have really wanted to attempt, but at the same time, I feel as if that Jet Set Radio isn't really remembered for its platformer aspect, because if I'm being honest, I will say it is a little bit bare bones. I feel like the issue here was that Jet Set Radio as a franchise was just never really given a chance to properly grow. But I'm hoping that when we finally receive that Jet Set Radio 3 in a couple years, I'm really hoping that they try to evolve on what they established with the first 2 entries, because I'd say they have a little bit of catching up to do, especially with Bomb Rush Cyberfunk out there. I would personally honestly recommend all 3 of these games, if you have them available of course. And yeah, that kind of transitions into something else that I wanted to talk about, and it's the fact that Jet Set Radio is going to be delisted from Steam on December 6th of 2024. I don't know why, but for some reason Sega just wants to get rid of all these games, like for both the Genesis collection and the Dreamcast bundle on Steam, and funnily enough, basically everything that isn't like a mainline Sonic title, like Sonic 1, 2, 3 and Knuckles, Adventure and Adventure 2, they're not getting the axe. It's just everything else, which is a massive shame. One thing I did learn, however, is the fact that multi-billionaires don't really like it when you spray them with spray paint. I kind of wanted to try this theory out to see if it actually works on someone. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all next time. See ya.
You know, I changed my mind. Kill yourself.